We are live, people. How is everybody doing? Let me see something. I think we were at ridiculous numbers of people in on the stream before we got started. Let me just put it on pause here. 1,500 people waiting before we got started. This is amazing. This is amazing. I think I need to thank the SDNY one more time, but I think what Robert Barnes and we have got going on Sunday nights, it's phenomenal. I think there's nothing better to watch on a Sunday night in order to get the news. To think, once upon a time when I was a kid, I thought 60 Minutes was the place to get the news. Oh, okay. And incidentally, while Robert gets here, just an anecdote. I'm, in the park playing with the kids and talking to one of the parents. And I told them to go watch Nate Brody's Breonna Taylor video because nobody knows what was presented in that video. I run into the same person a little later, and they're like, I didn't know any of this. I was operating on the same news that they had gotten the wrong address, which Nate referenced in the video. And the persons were talking, and they say, like, what am I supposed to do? A person who just wants to know the news, doesn't have however many hours it took Nate to put into that video, doesn't know that there are places where you can get, I like to call it, unbiased news. I think it's as accurate as you're going to get anywhere because we admit when we're wrong and we correct ourselves when we're wrong. And how do you get people to know this exactly? So I just go around, tell people, you need to get away from what you think you're getting as information because you're getting misinformation, and you need to find these gems where you can get this type of knowledge. And I think that's what we've got going here with Barnes on the Sunday nights. I think it's amazing. And by the attendance and the feedback, I think everybody loves it. So let me see here. Let's see. We got hit that like. Help is on the way. Thank you very much. We're just going to bring up some comments before we get into it with Barnes. He's not here yet, but I like to warm up the crowd and give the intros and the rules of the game, which I'll get into in a second. 60 Minutes used to remind me as a kid that it was Sunday night. School was the next day, and I had to go to bed after it was over, so I hated 60 Minutes. I have the exact same memory, and I used to remember watching it with my parents, having no interest in watching it, thinking it was the pinnacle, the definition of news. And if I had known then what I know now, thank you very much, Brad. If I had known then what I know now, I don't know. We would have probably had more arguments as a family on Sunday nights. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So there would be 7 of us at a table. My dad's a lawyer. 4 of the 5 kids became lawyers. We had animated discussions as it was. But my goodness, if only I knew then what I knew now. And I've only been awakened in the last 4 or 5 years. WJ Dad says, discuss Gleason's submission to Sullivan. I haven't read the Gleason submission. I read Sidney Powell's third supplemental argument brief and the government's supplemental exhibit. We're definitely talking that. We're going to talk about that. I'm trying to figure out how to screen share with my computer, but I'm not all that tech savvy, and I should have probably tried to do it earlier. Thank you very much, WJ. Susan M. Hi, everybody, and morning Viva from Australia. Are you guys allowed? You still allowed using the internet in Australia? Okay, I shouldn't make jokes like that because I'm not making light of. We are going. For anyone who doesn't know, I did a live stream with Avi Yamini, Australian Israeli reporter who has recently started working with Rebel News. And we did a live stream and we talked about the situation in Australia, the lockdown. And for anybody who doesn't know, mind-blowing. What he described as the lockdown that's been in effect on and off for months now. You couldn't go beyond 5 kilometers from your house, only for an hour a day for exercise outside of your house, 1 person at a grocery store at a time per family to do the grocery shopping within the 5K radius. And Quebec seems to, we're not quite going down that road, but for anybody who's been watching my videos, we're only off by a question of degrees, not by much. Siborium, is Biden guaranteed to win with the Brett nomination? Is she the worst choice Trump could have made? So I know what Robert's prediction was. I know what Robert's sentiment was. I'm on the fence. Legault. I knew more about Legault only because of Robert. But I don't think so. And I don't think so only because if anyone's following me on Twitter, I just tweeted out an article by Noah Feldman. And for anybody who doesn't know or remember who Noah Feldman is, Noah Feldman was the expert in the impeachment for the Democrats. The young, skinny guy, hair narrows it down a little bit. He just put out an article saying that he disagrees with Trump, but these are the rules, and he supports Barrett as a nominee. And he's going to live by the rules, and he's going to live by the choices that people have made. In particular, RBG not retiring 5 years ago and being appointed by someone who would have, had that seat for 20 to 30 years. Says people live by the rules. The Constitution is the Constitution, notwithstanding people's wishes or desires. And he's with her. And if someone who I consider to be a very leftist Democrat is supporting the nomination, I think other people are going to be swayed who are even less left than Noah Feldman. Read the article. It's a good article. David March, welcome to the perks of being a YouTube member. There's not many sneak peeks at the videos. I'm trying to get all of this stuff in here. It's coming in fast. Hey, Viva, I really like your content. I was wondering if you would be covering the legal actions between Epic Games and Apple at some point. It's on the map. It's on the to-do list, but it's not the thing that I'm most familiar with, and it's not the thing I'm most passionate about as far as legal battles go, but I should do it because a lot of people are asking, and it is interesting. I know it's interesting. I think I've missed a few here, but let's just do this. We got Ghost of Reckon says, I like the avatar. I just want to comment that you, Barnes, Uncivil, and Nate give me hope. So many people just cannot disagree with someone honestly and without malice. You guys should teach politicians how to act. Thank you very much, by the way, Ghost of Reckon and or Recon. There's two things. We might not disagree with each other enough to make it like, tooth and nail scratching at the face battles. I think we do, incidentally, and I think we do get along even in our disagreement. And we can disagree with each other without it being a reflection in our own minds of the soul, the evil nature of the other person who dares have a different belief. Politicians, they don't win politics by playing that way, unfortunately. Maybe one day the tide will turn on the nature of politics. Support good content and fellow Canadian. Go Viva. TH, thank you very much. Little Rock in the house. Some names are much more familiar than others. Did you forget to put out notifications? I hope you didn't. And it is not YouTube blocking. I sent it out, but YouTube is not always great about this, and we know that, but whatever. People will get here, and I'll yammer away until Robert comes and give people 10 minutes to tune in. All cops are bad versus Amy Coney Barrett fight. So I don't think that. Well, I want to see what Barnes has to say. I don't think it's the worst choice just based on seeing the reaction from Noah Feldman already. I know how Barnes feels about it, but we'll see how it pans out. I had no idea she had 7 kids. I mean, I sort of feel bad now because when she gets appointed to the SCOTUS, I imagine that's a full-time job in and of itself. Okay, we got that. I may have missed a couple. So other things, by the way, standard rules. I see Robert there, and he is looking dapper as always. Thank you in advance for the super chats. I do my best to get to all of them. I'm going to miss some invariably. I can't interrupt the conversation every time one comes in. I'm going to bring up all of them, if not all of them, as best I can. But if I don't get to them, don't be mad. Don't hold it against me. Don't say I'm stealing your money and ignoring you. If you're going to feel that way, if I don't get to it, don't do the super chat. It is a question of support, getting your question highlighted so other people can see it. It is not a definitive right of entry into the conversation because sometimes it just doesn't work. And I hate feeling bad, and I hate people thinking I've taken their money. Also, you should know YouTube takes 30% of it. And if you have a moral qualm with that, which I understand people do, there are other ways to support us if you so want to. Oh, you can't see my shirt. So that's it. That is the preamble warm-up. Let me see if I can get this name. Dwade Dragon. Dwade. I'm such an idiot. Sorry, Dwade Dragon. On a scale of 1 to 10, how salty do you think Barnes is about Trump's pick? Well, let me see. I can see him right now. I haven't been following him all day, but someone did say that he was retweeting Cenk Unger and other people. I would say he's salty. I don't know if he bet on it. I don't know if he was riding futures and then didn't, might have hedged his bets. Let's see. Let's bring him in and see what Robert has to say about it. Robert, how you doing?
This is how I'm doing.
and just to show you, I've got freshly squeezed orange juice. So I said, The one funny thing about drinking on a stream, and I said it during the after the Aviamini stream where he was drinking a glass of wine, and everybody seemed to be chalking up his Australian accent to being drunk on the internet. I said, when I have a drink, I have a personality that I do and say things that if people think I'm drinking, they will attribute to the alcohol. So I don't even want to give people that thought reflex. So I'm going to go OJ. But Robert, on a scale of 1 to 10, how salty are you feeling?
It's disappointing, but I mean, it's not for people who are wondering if I had a big bet on it. I did not. I told people last week it was time Lagoa had gone from very small to pretty profitable. She was up to 40%, and it was time to trade out of that. So I usually give my betting pick recommendations on Richard Barris's People's Pundit on Mondays. So it did no major impact there. This was a profitable betting weekend out here in Vegas. Disappointment because I don't think she'll be a good justice, but time will tell. I think from an election standpoint, I'll have more commentary in detail about that tomorrow on the People's Pundit show. We do What Are the Odds every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time, and I'll go into detail as to what I think that will be. The short answer is I think that at least for me, I'm holding all bets and in a watch and wait mode. This is an incredible time period to be alive. We've had two things that have never happened in the history of presidential elections. One, a pandemic lockdown. We've had pandemics, but never lockdowns that had dramatic impacts on society, on the economy, on a lot of things that make political prediction very, very difficult. We're in uncharted territory. We're mapping the water as we enter a waterway we've never been in before. Or another way to think of it is it may be the same waterway, but the weather has changed in ways we've never been able to address before or seen before. And then now we have literally in the middle of the election, not only a Supreme Court debate, but a Supreme Court debate where we're moving from one ideology to a very different ideology, at least in public perception. So usually that's when, and I'll go into a history of it here a little bit later on, as to when the Supreme Court the nominations tend to get really contested. They fit a pattern. It usually is when there's a major ideological shift. So when people are trying to figure out, why did Gorsuch not face much of a challenge, but Kavanaugh did? Why did Scalia not face much of a challenge, but Bork did? Why did Thomas face a challenge, but Souter did not? Usually it will be because they're either substituting for a judge appointed by the other party, or they're substituting for a judge who's seen as ideologically very different from the new judge. And that's usually what triggers it. And by the way, for those who don't know, there's a lot of this sort of Frontline has this big piece out there on PBS about how this all started with Bork. Folks, so when we started our country, Congress's answer to justices they didn't like was to impeach them. So we've been through much more political partisan time periods. Just go back and watch or read about, you can't watch, but read about the impeachment of Justice Samuel Chase. We discussed it some when we were discussing impeachment of Trump earlier on. So this has been a long history where justice contests get nasty and get mean and get vicious. And I'll preview what I think, where I think the Democrats will attack from, and where I think the Republicans will answer from, and where I think it may shake out both in the court of public opinion and in the Senate in terms of going forward. And that's separate from my own personal preference. I think,
I want to specify that because you were strong on Lagoa. And that's not to say that you don't think Amy Barrett is going to not get confirmed. I imagine you think she is going to get confirmed, say handily or relatively handily.
I'll save that for a little bit later, so everybody has to watch a little bit longer in the segment. Okay. And by the way, I've got a new solution for all the haters. Don't send it to the email. Don't send it to Viva Fry on Twitter. Instead, comment in the YouTube section because it will help feed the algorithm. And if it's smart enough and good enough, I may even respond. I don't mind hate. It's just got to be at least semi-intelligent or somewhat funny.
It is, incidentally, that is where the good, go to fight in the YouTube comment section respectfully. And I mean, fight as in argue there, because that's where people, first of all, Robert reads pretty much all the comments. And if it's a legitimate criticism, Robert will get to it. So now, incidentally, and I couldn't put the
and
link
even some of the crazier criticisms I'll respond to. Now, if it tends to be really dumb, I might make fun of you, but that's your risk. So, but go ahead and take your shot. There was somebody, I won't even repeat what their Twitter name was, but they were taking shots at they're attacking your vlog on Flynn. And I was okay. I was going to respond, and then I saw their Twitter name and their Twitter handle, and I was like, I can't take this person seriously. I'm sorry. You can't call yourself that name, and I can't even repeat the name on YouTube. That's what the name was. So but yeah, I mean, I always look forward to good informed debate. I know that there's some Trump supporters that are on the hate mode right now, which is fine. There's no problem with that. And for people out there who get curious about my Twitter feed, which I'll often get this whenever I tweet someone that's outside of the Trump world or so forth. I didn't design my Twitter feed for the public at all. I didn't even get into Twitter until late 2016. I was studying it for the election betting. And created a Twitter feed solely for my internal curational purposes. And it turned out that a lot of people were interested in what that internal curation looked like, but it was never intended. So what people are doing is they're seeing each day, like some people say, why in the world do you have 50 tweets up in a day? Because folks, it's my internal library. So if you want to sneak peek at and it's going to be a combination of ideas, notes, my own internal ideas, internal suggestions, things I found interesting, things I want to go back and look at, things I want to research, sometimes to oppose rather than agree with. I don't agree with Shanko Hooger. I don't agree with some of the people I'm tweeting out currently on Barrett. In fact, quite the contrary. I want to go and read what they're saying. But it's a internal curational tool. So you're getting a sneak peek at my library, but don't get mad at what's in my library.
Well,
so
and that's the thing. I think you made a prediction on who you thought it should be. And I don't think it reflects necessarily on whether or not you think Amy Barrett's going to have any problem getting confirmed. One thing I wanted to say was that, I couldn't find the link for What Are the Odds. I tried to put it up in the pinned comment, but it doesn't seem that the link exists until the day after. But it's a YouTube channel called What Are the Odds?
Yeah, it's People's Pundit. So it's a show that's on his channel. Okay. So it's on the people, and I'll find it and put it in the comment section so that people can, because that's where I'll do a lot more of the electoral commentary, political betting commentary, things like that. People who bet Lagoa on last Friday and then sold it on Monday when I recommended it made money. So so it's another bet that was profitable. Obviously, my bet, you can only bet small amounts on the Supreme Court, so that was not my major concern. My concern with Barrett is her jurisprudence, as we discussed on was it Thursday? Yeah, Thursday show.
Yeah.
And Uncivil Law had a different approach. Nate had his own approach. And Viva stayed reasonably neutral as normal.
Well, I got to say neutral only because I'm mildly ignorant on Barrett's ruling history.
As are most of the people in the Trump White House.
Well, incidentally, Mike Cernovich also was reiterating your sentiment or sharing your sentiment when she approves, if and when, goes 5-4 on justifying the lockdowns. You'll have that to thank. Whether or not in the long run it'll work itself out in terms of the other perks of having a Republican conservative nominee on the bench, we'll see. And so I'll just bring this up. Little Rock says, I think Viva, Uncivil, Nate, and Robert, if you keep doing as many videos as you have been, should create your own webpage and live stream for that page. You could do a 3 days of video. Or at least I would help support it. I'm thinking about it. Robert and I have discussed it. It's just a question of creating another channel to manage is not the easiest thing in the world. It's just you end up uploading the wrong videos to the wrong channel.
The utility of YouTube is a useful platform. 30% might be pricey. But that part is not really that problematic because they've made the platform very easy, a single one-stop shop. Every substitute has struggled, as Peter Thiel correctly probably argues. Tech is a natural monopoly, just due to the nature of it. And so that really, the censorship is a future concern, and the demonetization is a future concern. But for which Barrett's probably going to be another problematic vote on the Supreme Court, but that's another issue for another day. But it's still pretty useful. So we definitely may incorporate them. I think that first time out seemed to go and flow very easily and very effectively, and in part because everybody respects one another, and in part because they come at positions from not a hardcore position, like some of the people hating on me right now that I'm either a deep state shill or I'm a Rusky spy. I have to find my secret vodka stash,
They get there's a certain order of accusations. They all go to the accusation of the person and not the legitimacy of the argument, which is where I think everything on one side and the other, when when people engage in that wrong sort of debate tactic, it's always go after the person and not the arguments. Jose Ruiz says, feed the algorithm, NDG rules. NDG is Notre Dame de Grâce in Montreal, I think, unless it's a typo for our, well, what was I going to say? Okay, so Lagoa Barrett. Oh, no. On the issues of the attacks of Barrett, I noticed what I think is probably going to be the trend. They're just going to avoid attacking her personally, and they're just going to go at large at any nominee that Trump would have put out there. I noticed Elizabeth Warren has already done it. Like, doesn't matter who. We're not going to attack her as a person. We're just going to attack her as an entity. It could have been someone we would have otherwise liked, but we're not going to go after her for being a woman, obviously. Some people are going after her for having adopted 2 children from Haiti, which is mind-blowing to me. Like, it's mind-blowing that it just confirms the theory that when someone wants to find that accusation, there's nothing you can do. If you don't adopt a child, you're racist. If you do adopt a child, you're from Haiti, you're literally racist for having adopted the child for whatever we know how to fill in the blank as to what the accusation is. And then you compare it to what, other charities did or did not do for Haiti, and it makes that accusation, doesn't matter that I find it offensive. It just makes it absolute projection again, is that you're accusing this person of who has actually done something meaningful to literally save the lives of 2 children. And you're accusing this person of something that another charity whose name shall not be spoken, did not do, and instead chose to do the exact opposite when raising hundreds of millions of dollars. So I don't think most people are going to go after her for that, but there's already some doing it. But I think they're just going to keep it broad, and it's a Trump pick. It's an invalid nomination, fight tooth and nail to make sure it doesn't happen or go through until the new president is elected, who might very well be Trump anyhow, but we'll see.
I see it as a twofold factor that we could sort of break it down as. One is what's going to happen in the confirmation hearings? How are Democrats going to come at her? How are Republicans going to respond? Where do I think that will play out in the court of public opinion? Where do I think that will play out in the Senate for confirmation vote purposes, sort of as category 1? And category 2 is, if she is confirmed, what will be her impact on the Supreme Court? And historically, what big a role has the Supreme Court played in major public policy decisions politically in the history of the country? So we can take those in either order, whichever one you think makes the most sense is to start with.
Let's start with something that will allow you to talk for 2 minutes while I go put slow mode on the chat, because I forgot I haven't done that.
No problem.
Start with the first one, and I'm gonna take myself out while you talk.
So I think for most people, there was an assumption by Republicans and some conservatives that the net effect of that, because of what happened with Kavanaugh, because of what happened with Thomas, because of what happened at Barrett's first hearing, that the line of attack on Barrett would be personal and would be some of her Catholicism, public statements she's made in law review articles concerning how that plays a role on the court, her association with a group called People of Praise, and whether that would be a subject of criticism. And I think that the Republicans and Trump and the conservatives were pretty confident that line of attack would mostly backfire. My own view has been that is not the most likely line of attack. If we look at it historically from a Supreme Court perspective, in fact, there's been 2 different lines of attack. Either one of 3 things happens when the opposite party or when there's a controversial Supreme Court nominee, and usually that controversy is shaped by who they're replacing. So, for example, when Scalia came in, he was not heavily criticized, even though he had some opinions that were like Bork, because he was not thought to change the nature of the court, the direction of the court, nor was he replacing someone who the Democrats had promoted. When Bork came in 1987, Bork was going to change the constitution of the court effectively. And by the constitution in that context, I mean its ideological makeup. And in particular, he was replacing the sort of the moderate, the person who was seen as like the Kennedy at the time. And because of that, they went after Bork. But it's important to note they did not go after Bork at all on any personal issues. It was all policy. It was all based on public statements. And so their motivation to go after him was that Bork was that he was a major ideological shift. And if you look at all the Supreme Court nominations in American history, you'll find that they are the most contested when basically one party is replacing the other party. So, and number one, and in other words, that a Democratic nominee is being replaced by a Republican nominee or vice versa, and when there's a major ideological impact on the court. So that's when it tends to get very fierce. And there's actually a long history of this going back to, like I said, the early 1800s. I mean, they tried to remove Chase from the Supreme Court because of how he had ruled and how other trial court judges had ruled against one party versus the other. So in the modern age, we have dealt with this. It really, well, actually goes back to Abe Fortas. Fortas was attacked based on personal reasons, but that was because of the nature. They look at one of two lines of attack, personal or policy. With Bork, they went after him on policy grounds. They went after him based on statements he had made as a judge, statements he had made as a professor, statements he had made in his legal scholarship. It became so popular. It was the first sort of like televised hearings on public policy. Even though there was actually a history of it before then, it went into the iconography as being a driving or key decisive moment because of that. And so from that came all of these other changes. Senator Kennedy gave an infamous speech, and people should go back and look at Bork because that's probably what I believe we're going to see with Barrett in terms of the line of attack. The Republicans have made a tactical error in assuming it would be personal, and I'll get into that in a second. With Bork, Senator Kennedy, as soon as he was nominated, while he was still sitting in the White House sipping whiskey with his son and with other people, Senator Ted Kennedy went to the floor of the Senate and said, "In Judge Bork's America," and he went on a long litany. In Judge Bork's America, women are getting back alley abortions. In Judge Bork's America, whites and blacks can't sit at the same table. In Judge Bork's America, you have to get a sterilization as a condition of employment. In Judge Bork's America, and he went on and on and on. The police do midnight raids and break down your houses and break down your doors without any remedy. In Judge Bork's America, you can no longer even touch the doors of the courthouse to get relief. I mean, it was from a political persuasive basis, whatever you think of Kennedy, whatever you think of the substantive content of his speech, from a political persuasive perspective, it was probably the most effective speech ever given on the Senate floor for any Supreme Court nominee ever. It literally killed Bork from the get-go.
And if I stop you there, sorry, Corliss _ Drinkard says, for Robert, do you think Bork's role in the Saturday Night Massacre played a significant role in his rejection for SCOTUS? What did Bork get rejected by in terms of votes?
Substantially. I mean, now the Democrats had taken over the Senate in 1986, so they had a majority by the 1987 vote for Bork. But Bork even lost Republican votes. I think he lost a half dozen Republican votes, as I recall. The statements Bork had made, I mean, my conservative friends consider it just thus the word Bork entered our dictionary. To get borked basically means to get screwed. And so for my conservative friends, they see it as all illegitimate. There was clearly some over-the-top political attacks on him, and he was clearly one of the most brilliant legal minds in the history of American jurisprudence. But if I'd been a senator, I would have never voted for Bork. Bork opposed the Civil Rights Act. Bork did not believe there was any right to privacy in the Constitution. So those two, Bork did believe in forced sterilizations as a condition of employment being completely constitutional. So Bork came from the authoritarian school within the right. So originalism and textualism were his ideological architect creations, but his political roots were very strongly in the authoritarian wing of the right. And so when the left took over the legal academy, the response of the right was the Federalist Society. Bork was one of the key people in creating that. The Federalist Society is very pro-business, very pro-corporation, very pro-state power in a wide range of contexts. So while, for the populist side of the right, of Trump's base, they're good on parts of the First Amendment. They're good on religious expression. They're good on the Second Amendment. They're good sometimes on the Fourth Amendment. They're bad on almost all the rest. And so from the populist perspective, from the corporatist perspective, from the more authoritarian perspective, Bork was their dream justice. He was clearly the brightest mind that represented that political viewpoint in American judicial modern history. But then after that, the mistake that Republicans made not long after Bork, when they put Thomas up, was they assumed, okay, as long as we dodge a policy debate, they can't come after him. And that was the beginning of the personal hit jobs, the personal smears. Because as soon as they realized how the Republicans had figured out how to counter the policy criticism, and basically was to be really bland, to say, "Oh, I can't preview my opinion on that because that would be unethical, and I can't talk about that kind of gig." And I think that's where both the right and the left are right, that the borking had a negative effect, because now we don't know what our judges believe before
the borking had a negative effect. The name has an unfortunate sound to it to begin with, but
yes, it does. Yes, it does. You change the B to the P, and you get what you get. But with Thomas, once they realized that it happened, that's when they did the ambush of Anita Hill. And then after that, it has varied, depending on whether the nominee is really going to change the ideological shape of the court or is really replacing a nominee of the other party, has been the heavy driver as to how much they get up in arms. So Ginsburg wasn't going to change much, so she didn't face much. Breyer wasn't going to change much, so he didn't face much. Roberts wasn't going to change much, so he didn't face much. By the way, for all my conservative friends out there bashing me, almost all of the same people who backing Barrett backed Roberts and vouched to everybody what a great loyal conservative they would be. So good luck with that prediction.
In the last, so I only remember Clarence Thomas because of the infamy of what happened, and I know Kavanaugh because it's recent memory. Who have been the other SCOTUSes that have been appointed in the last, let's say, 20 years?
So you start with, basically you had the attempt to put in Bork. Bork gets rejected. He was replaced with Kennedy. Then after that, you had Souter, but Souter was considered pretty much non-controversial. And he wasn't, they didn't think he would change the ideological constitution of the court. Thomas, they did think would change the nature of the court. So that's when they did the personal ambush on Thomas. After Thomas, you get Ginsburg and Breyer under Clinton. And because they weren't seen as changing the ideological character in the court, no major effect. Also, the nominees they were replacing, they weren't much different from, at least in public perception at the time. Then it's not until Roberts that you get another SCOTUS nominee. And contrary to what's out there, they're saying that W put 2 justices on the bench, that when he hadn't won the popular vote. That's not true. That his nominees went in after 2004. First was Roberts, and then was Alito, who they used to call Scalito because of how Scalia-oriented he was perceived to be while he was on the Third Circuit. He, too, was a little more controversial, but they didn't think it would change the nature of the court. Then Obama gets in, and Obama gets Kagan, and Obama gets Sotomayor, and both of those were also thought of as not changing the nature of the court. Then when Scalia passes away, you get Gorsuch, and because he was replacing Scalia, while there was some vestigial anger over Garland not getting the chance to replace him, the net effect of it was they weren't going to push back much against him. And in general, he did not have the same degree of history that Bork had policy-wise, or that Barrett has policy-wise. And then after that came Kavanaugh, and Kavanaugh was seen as changing the nature of the court because he was replacing Kennedy. And they thought, okay, he's going to replace Kennedy. He's now the swing vote. And that's why I told people in advance. I was in trial during most of Kavanaugh's hearing. So I just told people as soon as he nominated, said there's going to be a nasty fight over Kavanaugh. So I don't know whether it's going to be policy or personality because I don't know his history that much and I don't have time to look at it. But I said I can guarantee it because that the Democrats are going to be up in arms over the change of Kennedy being out on the court. What they fully did not appreciate is that Kennedy chose Kavanaugh. Kennedy told Trump that he would only step down if Trump picked Kavanaugh. And that's also why Collins was always in the bag for the vote, because Collins wanted Kavanaugh. So the combination was Kennedy and Collins get together, tell Trump, I'll step down, Kennedy, as long as you put in Kavanaugh. That meant Kavanaugh was always going to pass, but it also meant there was going to be some sort of ambush. And when there wasn't a policy ambush in the first couple of weeks, that meant the personal ambush was coming. It was just whatever it was going to be. So with Barrett, when Barrett went up, she had no judicial history in 2017. Her legal scholarship is as pedantic as you can possibly be. When people tell me she's brilliant, I'm like, okay, how do you tell from those 17 very technical and like it's stare decisis in the next article, stare decisis in the next article, stare decisis in the next article, stare decisis. I mean, you can only write so many times on stare decisis. And
explain to everybody what a stare decisis is before, for those who don't know.
The power and role of precedent. And she writes in such a bland way, and she chose the most bland technical topic that there's nothing in there you can make hay out of. I mean, she managed, I think, to write 16 times on the topic. It's like, what the? I mean, honestly, it's rather obvious. I mean, that was part of my skepticism of her. But so there's nothing in this scholarship other than her very first law review article. So her first law, when you're first trying to get published, it's tricky. So you often pick a more controversial, difficult topic, even if you want to stay otherwise non-controversial.
It is so. Just so people appreciate this, they're in dissecting or going after the SCOTUS nominee. They're going back to papers they wrote in university as postdoc students, as studying and exploring various topics of law. They go back to these papers that they've written sometimes 20 years earlier to then attack them on the positions they've taken in those papers.
Correct. And that started really with Bork. There were examples of it in the past of, like, for example, Nixon, in order to rally up the Southerners to vote for him against the Democratic Party that had been their ancestral party, he would put up some real conservative, inflammatory Southern judge just to get the Democrats to have to reject a Democratic kind of personality from the South, just to rally Southern votes, but knowing they would fail and they would burn out and not get nominated, so he didn't have to get criticism from the other side of the party. But that was based on their controversial statements, usually, though, in decisions. But in fact, questioning a judge based on his prior statements goes all the way back to the founding of the country. So there were, that kind of examination is not foreign to us. It's just the most aggressive version of it was what happened to Bork. And the Republicans were totally unprepared for it because it hadn't happened in like 20 plus years. So they weren't ready for it. They hadn't studied their full long history, just as they have it with Barrett. I mean, they forgot about Bork somehow in the way they're approaching this. So the particularly legal scholarship and court opinions are the best thing to go after, of course, if you're on the opposite side. But they look at anything.
Court opinions make sense in terms of what they've done actually on the job. The personal attacks they've never made sense for me. I'm not even saying this as a partisan thing. They've never made sense to me because they've been on sometimes the highest or second highest courts for decades. They've been vetted however many times. The personal attacks, I wasn't conscious during the Clarence Thomas situation. I can only analyze it now in retrospect. Kierkegaard, it's Kierkegaard. Life can only be lived forwards, but understood. Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. Looking back on Clarence Thomas now, I look at it with a bit more skeptical of an eye than I would have otherwise might have had I been more than 8 years old. Going after people personally depending on the accusation when they've been vetted again makes no sense. Going after things they might have written about in university also makes no sense, just given, the types of things you would be inclined to pick up as interesting subject matter, if only to entertain your professor. So, I guess, does Barrett not have a long enough or what's the word I'm looking for? Diverse enough portfolio of judgments that they can rely on? Because I know they're gonna go with the abortion fear. I imagine.
Oh, well, I think it's gonna be multiple things. So I think you're gonna see a multiple layer at it. But just to finish up that sort of backstory, so after Bork, their prior policy decisions never become an issue again. Instead, they see the success of almost stopping Thomas with the personal attack and resuscitate that for Kavanaugh. Everybody in between didn't face meaningful attack. When Barrett was first nominated for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, that was her first government job of any kind. So the Democrats didn't have any line of attack beyond one law review article she had written. Now, the law review article she had written was the only controversial piece she ever wrote, or even got close to writing. And it was her first piece. And for people out there who don't know how law review articles work, if you're trying to break into the legal academy, you need to get published. And law review articles, unlike many other articles for the most part, are not blindly read. So in other words, like normally the way peer review works is before you can get approved for publication, your article is reviewed by people who don't know who wrote it. That puts a premium on the quality of the article, not the name of the author. That is not true in the law review context generally. The law review context, they know who wrote it. So the quality, this is by the way, a lot of law review articles are crap. But it's the name of the author that matters and the name of the author that governs rather than the content of the article. And so for her to break into the legal academy, she needed to write something that would get their attention, given her name was an unknown name. And by doing so, that she chose a controversial topic. And the topic was whether or not a Roman Catholic judge should recuse themselves from any decision where there's a conflict between the Catholic Church and the position they must take in the case. That was the only thing that they had on her during the Senate hearings from the Democratic side of the aisle. So that's why they focused on that issue. And because the Democrats are come from the secular left increasingly these days, they asked the questions in ways that came across quite reasonably as religiously offensive to a wide range of conservatives in the country. The mistake, however, Republicans have made is since then things have changed. Barrett now has over 100 decisions to her name in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. In fact, more than that, when you realize she co-signed certain things, a whole bunch of decisions are unpublished, et cetera. I've read more than 100 decisions related to her. Or injunction decisions, TRO decisions, other decisions about a lawyer, for example, that what they were trying to keep out of the courthouse, et cetera. So now I was trying to tell my Republican conservative friends who were for Barrett, it's like, okay, that's fine. But realistically, be prepared that the line of attack is not going to be because she has a big, pretty family. The line of attack is not going to be because she's Catholic. In fact, it will be a backstory, the sort of group that they want to call a Handmaid's Tale kind of group that's not about her Catholic association, but about a group called People of Praise. And that will be a backstory. They'll put that out there for their secular left base. They'll put that out there for the visual imagery, but it will not be anything you will hear from the Democratic Senate, either now or particularly at the hearing date. The issue with Barrett is that if you went through a list of what Democrats would have seen where Trump has a disadvantage with Biden, and you would look through that list and see, is there an issue that Barrett has ruled on that we can now raise in the debate, given the presidential election is right upon us, where Trump has a disadvantage? Something related to the pandemic, something related to healthcare, something related to race relations, something related to the Me Too era, something related to Black Lives Matter, something related to the environment, something related to employee relationships. Well, folks, she's got rulings they can make hay with on all of those topics. She has a Bork-like past without Bork's intellect on the bench. And so you may, as a conservative, say, that's fantastic. I like that. I like someone that does it that way. That's fine. It's just that's where the attack's going to come. So, for example, probably the number one thing you're going to hear out of the gate. In fact, by the way, abortion will probably be the last issue they discuss. They already have their base locked into her on abortion. That won't be their primary attack. Their primary attack is going to be Obamacare and pre-existing conditions, because she's made the statement that Roberts' decision was wrong and that it should be overturned. And Obamacare has amazingly been redefined over the past 4 years to go from what it was at the time it passed in 2010, which was, at least in the perception of its critics, a very regulatory structure that created a quagmire administratively that was very difficult to abide by, and that often led to higher premiums and higher costs, to today. If you ask people about Obamacare, the ordinary person, they associate it with protecting healthcare insurance in case of pre-existing conditions. So in 2018, the only number one issue by far, like 80% of all Democratic congressional advertising in the House, was just on pre-existing conditions. That's how persuasive it was in the polls and the focus groups. And of course, that's what helped them gain 40 plus seats in the House in 2018. So that's going to be, and I told people this last week. I was telling some of them privately because I wouldn't even put it out there publicly. But once it was clear that she was the nominee, and some people are already saying it, I said, okay, by the way, here, be prepared. If you back Barrett, here's the line of attack. The line of attack is going to be Obamacare pre-existing conditions, number one. Number two, it's going to be her employee decisions. It's going to be all the disadvantaged groups that Democrats see the law is protecting. So it won't just be women on abortion. It will be people's access to health care, disabled people's access to the legal system, employees trying to do something about discrimination, women filing claims for sexual assault, people pulled over and arrested for driving while black and Black Lives Matter, the various, that there's a right to own a gun if you're a felon, but not a right to vote if you're a felon. All of those kind of things that go to the working class North that the Democrats need to win back the Senate and to win back the White House and to hold the House. All three come back to basically about 7 states from Maine to Minnesota. And for that voter group, they're going to attack her on it's the caricature of the Republican Party, that they're mean and that they're pro-corporate, and they want that cop on the street hitting you over the head. It's going to be that routine. So that's where the attack's going to be. It's going to be a little bit of culture war, but it's going to be almost nothing personal. They'll let the social media far left people do the personal crazy attacks, but they already know not to do that. That's why you're seeing articles in liberal publications saying, "Don't attack her on religion. Don't attack her on a family."
And now that you mention it, incidentally, like the very virulent personal attacks I'm seeing on Twitter, the intellectuals thus far, I said it, I'm not sure if you were here, but Noah Feldman says, he's going to live with her. It's a good choice, even if he disagrees with, or doesn't like the timing. And thus far, the media, I've only seen Elizabeth Warren sort of bring up the abortion issue as the fear tactic, not specific to Amy, but as a general issue. And I haven't seen much criticism yet, but I know they set up the timeline for the process. I didn't look at it. What is the timeline now? What's going to be the next steps, and what can we expect?
So what I expect to happen is they've set the hearing dates to begin October 12th. What's going to happen in the 2-week interim is two things. One, you're going to see probably, here's what I anticipate. I think all this week, and it happened this morning on the Sunday shows, the Democratic line is going to be appointing Barrett will make it unconstitutional to protect pre-existing conditions. So 20 million plus Americans are screwed. That will be their message probably all week, because pre-existing conditions is such a huge winner on the Democratic side of the political aisle, or at least they believe so, and they have reason to believe so. And that's what Schumer came out and said. That's what Biden came out and said.
If I stop you there, didn't Trump? I mean, I know he did. He not just say he's going to sign an executive order to protect people with pre-existing conditions. Like, what's the disconnect that I'm missing there? Where Trump says he's going to sign an executive order, Senate's going to have to draw up a constitutional law, presumably. Like, how is Schumer saying that when Trump is saying the exact opposite?
It wouldn't be constitutional if Barrett's opinion is upheld. And Barrett's opinion is that the federal government has no authority to mandate insurance companies protect against pre-existing medical conditions. That's why the nomination of her created unique political exposure. So the key issue is, does the federal government have the power to require, under the Interstate Commerce Clause, insurance companies to have certain things in their contract? And one of those was the employer mandate, but that was on employers. But the other was, could they just compel insurance companies to participate in various groups for funding purposes? But the big one was, could they require insurance companies to extend coverage to those with pre-existing medical conditions? And the Democrats' interpretation of Barrett's argument that she made previously is that it's unconstitutional for the federal government to ever be able to require that, which means everything Trump's done to try to mute that issue is gone, because Trump can't salvage it. Because if the Supreme Court says, no, the federal government just has no business doing this constitutionally, then there's nothing he can do any more than what Congress could do. That's why she uniquely created a legal political issue there that otherwise wouldn't be present but for her.
Is it not possible that Trump can do something, not that anybody wants it, but can protect pre-existing conditions through some sort of government entity and not, or offer some carrot to insurance companies to do it? I mean, there could be creative ways of doing it other than legally requiring insurance companies to do it. He can do it through a government agency.
It would have to be a certain way. So there's certain strings you can sort of attach, but normally that only works for state governments. So you could put in a tax deduction. But insurance companies already have good tax deals, so and insurance companies have hated this restriction on their ability. I mean, the conservative criticism of the pre-existing conditions issue is that it distorts the market. That nowhere else why would any rational person get insured for something if they can just wait till the bad thing happens and then get insured? And yet you can't price that as an insurance company. That's the conservative criticism. But I can tell folks, 80% of Americans support this law limiting, and Trump understands that. That's why he's hammered this. And he had effectively muted this by saying he's going to sign executive orders protecting it. But what Barrett does is she removes it from the power of the federal government to do anything about, by saying it's unconstitutional to ever compel this or coerce this on insurance companies. That's how at least Democrats are going to interpret the statements she made, and her statements were broad enough that they could do so. Other candidates didn't have this risk attached to them. But it's such a huge issue for them. They were frustrated because they had lost this issue because Trump had done such a good job muting it. Now Barrett makes it easy, and it's just too tempting. They can go on it over and over, and at least in the public mind, people think if Obamacare is unconstitutional, that means no pre-existing conditions can be protected from being denied insurance coverage. So I think there's ways in which to get around it, but the problem is, you're then into the weeds. And when your argument has to be, Republicans tried in the House in 2018 to make some of these arguments. It didn't work anywhere. It didn't go anywhere with the public. It's in part because the public as a whole doesn't trust Republicans or Trump on healthcare. It's the Republicans are seen as, when you need somebody tough, I always call it, when you need tough dad, you pick the Republicans. This is the popular perception. Not saying it's right, wrong, anything else, just popular perception. When you need tough dad, that's the Republican. When you need soft mom, that's the Democrat. So when it comes to healthcare, that's all Democrats have held an advantage on that for the entire time healthcare has been an issue in this country, frankly, and a huge edge. And so and that will be priority one for them. The next hit they'll probably take will be interesting, where they go second, because there's a bunch of, unfortunately, with Barrett's record, it's like Bork's record. There's a lot of places to come at her. So there's some statements she made in the Me Too context that they can utilize. There's some statements she made in the Black Lives Matter context that they can utilize. Some statements that have been made in sort of midnight raids that they can utilize. Statements that she's made in corporate cases, employment, overtime, discrimination, disability, all of which they can utilize. They may go voting rights, it looks like, is where they're going to go. When she issued going back to an earlier super chat, she issued a dissenting opinion about whether or not, and I agree with her dissenting opinion, about whether or not felons should be denied gun rights just by being felons when there's no finding that what they did was a dangerous or violent crime. And her point was, historically, that was not consistent with what with any originalist interpretation of the Constitution. Now, I don't know why she has a habit of doing this. She decided to go in and expound at length about how voting rights are different somehow from this, and jury rights are somehow different from this. I mean, it sounded like a segregationist argument from 1930 about how somehow your Second Amendment rights are definitely originalist, but your right to vote and participate in a jury are totally not. It's aside from whether you agree or disagree with her, I'm just telling you, folks, that's bad politics. It looks bad. When you're going to have to explain, okay, voting rights are civic rights and jury rights are civic rights, and the state can take those away if you're just not virtuous enough. Your gun rights are okay, but everything else isn't. They're going to have a field day with this. So that's my guess is where they're going to go number two, because they want to tie it into the idea that she's a vote for Trump to, quote, steal the election, because they're going to hammer that. They've already previewed that. So that's, I think, category two. Category three will be a line you'll start hearing a lot. No confirmation until inauguration. No confirmation until inauguration.
Okay, let me stop you there, because Truman HW brings up a funny. I mean, I know that this is the argument I would think and make if I were so inclined, or that Trump says he's going to sign an executive order to guarantee pre-existing conditions, and then appoints Amy Barrett so that he knows that he won't be able to do it. Effectively tie his own hands. Sorry, say that again.
That's exactly what the Democrats are saying. That's where politically it's problematic for, in my view. You can, whatever you think about Obamacare, whatever you think about pre-existing conditions, I'm just telling you, folks, politically, that ain't a winner for Trump. There's a reason why he's been trying to preempt that issue now for 4 years, only going back to the campaign in 2016. So the third issue will be this no confirmation until, and this tells you that Democrats have tested this. I was trying to tell my Republican friends, the fact they're being real quiet about Barrett, except letting the far left say nutty stuff about Catholicism, is a sign that they're going to bring an ambush. It's not a sign that they're going to go along with just a Catholic attack, like they're clueless. One of the examples of this, you don't come up with something like no confirmation until inauguration unless you've tested it.
This sounds like if the glove don't fit, you must acquit type thing, so that you get people to feel the rhythm of the mantra.
Exactly. That's been tested multiple times, I guarantee you. My guess is they've already tested every line of attack. They knew Barrett was coming as a high risk. This is one of the downsides to Trump putting out a list for 4 years. They get to go through. This is why Biden is not doing it, folks. He's not going to allow anyone to come at a list against him with any surprise question. So they've been preparing for her all 3 years, looking at every single case she said, every controversial comment she said in those cases. And for whatever reason, she's had a tendency to volunteer more than she's had to in cases. And so I think that I think she did it because she wanted to signal to certain people to put her on the bench, to certain core constituencies that have a big influence in the Federalist Society. I think that's in part why she signed off on the lockdown decision. There's a side of the Federalist Society that supports it. Remember, folks out there, most Republican governors backed it. So I disagree.
Who was the Republican governor that was just getting booed in public because he was saying wear the Trump mask and at least show the world you support Trump while you're saving it, and he did not get love from his supporters.
The populist base doesn't like it, but most people with institutional power on the Republican side do. So there's just a gap there between the base and the power folks. So the net effect of it is that because she's volunteered a lot of statements, expect a Bork type set of criticism and a Bork type set of questions. The other, what they're not saying is some people that are mad. They're like, why don't they just have the hearings this week? It's because the Republicans know that or got a sense the Democrats are already prepared for those hearings. It's Barrett who is likely not prepared.
Yeah, it's cool. She's going to have to go now, sit in a room and get grilled by people who are going to prep her for cross-examination, like in a trial.
Exactly. And for people to understand Barrett is not like we both went through law school. There are, in my experience, two types who did well in law school. There was a third type that would make a great lawyer that often didn't do well in law school. That was your BSer, your great talker, your persuader. But often they didn't care about law school and the rest. But those guys are your trial lawyers. But your top two types that did well. One was your intuitive types, for whom law just comes natural and easy. It's just abstract. For people who fit in that category, don't share your opinions about things. Here's the second type: the memorizers. These were your teacher's pet in school. These are the people who did everything, they learned, and they would study and they would work really hard. And generally they find law school shocking because it's much harder than they're used to. They're used to getting all A's. And then all of a sudden law school is tough because it's really intuitive. It's designed for intuitive thinkers. Even though that's good for people like me, I've often been a critic of it because it's like 2/3 of the law doesn't require you be an intuitive thinker. You don't have to do contracts you don't have to be an intuitive thinker to do contracts. You don't have to be an intuitive thinker to do trial law. You don't have to be an intuitive thinker to draft wills and estates. For a lot of, I think it favored one side over the other. I thought too much, but that's what it is. She's not someone who comes at things intuitively. Intuitive people in the law can answer things on the fly and move around real quickly and real easy, particularly your oral argument types. Your literal thinkers, your lineal thinkers, those folks struggle more with on the fly questions. They need to be very prepared. Their whole life is based on preparation. So especially for someone like Barrett, they need to put her in a room for 2 weeks, have a bunch of smart people hammering her the way the Democrats are going to hammer her on, okay, why did you say this in this case? Why did you say that in this case? Why did you say this over here? Why did you say that over there? What does this mean? What does this entail? And be prepared in that direction. I hope, anyone who supports Barrett will hope that they prepare her effectively. Not giving away what I think on that.
Let me, I want to ask, there were a few super chat questions. I can't bring them up now, but they were good ones. Let me just see something. Took a picture of it. Okay. Craig Lino 504 says, why do you think Trump picked Barrett over Lagoa? Could Gardner, Romney, and Never Trumpers put pressure on him to pick Barrett? I think we've discussed it, but
yeah, two things there. One is that when it comes to hiring people, here's my take. Trump's terrible. And you don't take my word for it. Just listen to Trump. He said that the Secretary of State's an idiot, Secretary of Defense is an idiot, 2 national security advisors he picked are idiots, 2 feds of FBI he picked are idiots, 2 Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General he picked are idiots. He's the one who put them all there. He put Christopher Wray in charge of FBI, not anybody else. He put James Comey originally. He chose to extend it. Nobody else. He's the one who chose Sessions for Attorney General and then chose Rosenstein to be his deputy. Those were all Trump appointees. He put Tillerson in as Secretary of State. He put Mattis in as Secretary of Defense. He put Coates in as Director of National Intelligence. He put Wray in as head of FBI. And some of us were critical of every single one of those decisions and told them they were problematic. But what Trump has done, Trump loves campaigning, and Trump knows marketing and big ideas. Trump is not a granular detail guy. Trump is not a bureaucratic guy. He tries to run a loose, thin operation that's not too heavy on administration. He doesn't know DC at all. And ever since he won after he won the election, there were friends of mine who wanted good position, or people I knew Trump people that wanted me to introduce them, were willing to sacrifice very successful business and legal careers to help Trump. And I got back. The Trump people got back to me and said Bob Corker's handling all resumes and applications. This is a guy who I personally battled for 20 years in Tennessee. I was like, that's a joke. He hates Trump. I know exactly what he thinks. That's who Trump is. There was the guy who led the convention coup against him on the floor of the Republican National Convention, to his great public embarrassment in 2016. He now has one of the highest ranking positions in the administration. The joke used to be the way to get a job with Trump is to go up and slap him in the face and then he'll reward you. That's how it's been, unfortunately, folks. I mean, there's a reason why Ann Coulter has been agitated. There's some of her agitation that I think I don't agree with, but some of it's because anybody who knows the insides of what's happening in D.C. knows that Trump has almost rewarded none of his friends and rewarded almost all of his enemies. And it's just been, what it is. So it's not a,
Ann Coulter, Cernovich also have been pointing that out, that he has not protected his friends the way some might. And I know people who believe Trump is playing 4D chess. They say, yeah, he's waiting on Flynn. He's waiting on Roger Stone. But it's a criticism that a lot of people say.
He's the one who fired Flynn when people told him not to. I was telling people close to him not to fire him. It was a huge mistake. He wasn't listening. So the problem is Trump is a guy who, he himself in Art of the Deal said, don't look at resumes, look at skill sets. But as soon as he got to Washington, all he's done is look at resumes. He almost made George Conway his Solicitor General, who hates him. So, I mean, this gives you an idea. So I thought Gorsuch was the choice he put the most personal time in and was an excellent choice. Kavanaugh was just a Kennedy choice. That was a deal, but it was a good deal for Trump to take because it was an opportunity to do a second nomination. And Kavanaugh wasn't, had more of a mixed record. You like some things, not like other things. But Barrett, I think the second component. So first is that honestly, there just hasn't been a great record of Trump picking at least people from the populist wing of the party for positions of power. And the second part is, I have good reason to believe that Trump was told that she would be a reliable vote if the election is contested because she worked on Bush v. Gore. So she was one of the lawyers that was involved in the Bush v. Gore team. Which they're going to make a big hay out of. Democrats are. I think that will get a little ways, but I don't think that will be one of their more politically effective or impactful hits. So I think that relatively summarizes where they're coming at. Go back and look at what happened with Bork, and that will tell you where Democrats are going. I think conservatives are not well prepared for the attack. This is based on.
If I could stop you there, because maybe this can answer the next question. A couple of people have asked this. Noreen Moss, why put Barrett through a hearing when they have enough votes to bypass that? Can they just go straight to a vote, or are the Democrats not entitled to a cross-examination period?
They could, but that's almost never done. So put it this way: if Republicans start doing it, then Democrats will start doing that. So it's very disfavored. That won't happen. And so even whatever you think about it, won't happen. But for custom and practice and protocols, why? There's an argument that their internal rules require a hearing, but that would be up to debate. The Senate can just discard its internal rules whenever it wants to, mostly.
Very interesting. And there was one more. I had the comment up, so I'll read it. Sure. Stephen Carpenter, will ACB be a leader or a follower on SCOTUS? A leader. If leader, who will she lead? Follower, who will she follow? I'm predicting you're going to say she's going to be a follower and she's going to follow Roberts.
It's going to vary. So she's very, very confident person. She doesn't lack confidence. If I've read almost every Seventh Circuit opinion she's been a part of. And in that, she tends to be iconoclastic, not so iconoclastic that she reminds me of those students that really were memorizers in school. So if they see something, they're really technocrats. So she's very technical in the way she interprets things. And someone who doesn't always understand the intuitive component of something, like doesn't always understand how this might look, how the consequence of this idea might flow. That's not really her strong point. She's more of a check the box kind of person, but she's one of those people. She's like a grammar teacher. So in other words, if where you got the grammar wrong, she doesn't care. She'll be the leader. Where it's not something that's right up her alley, she'll be a follower. So there won't be a consistent pattern. She'll write. She won't be Scalia or anything like Scalia. Nothing like that. We're going to have another. We've had mediocre Supreme Courts now, frankly, for 40 years. Nobody's going to confuse these Supreme Courts with an opinion written by someone like Frankfurt or Douglas or Black. And so or even Warren for that matter. She'll be more, she's a technocratic kind of personality. You read her opinions and they tend to be highly technical. They're not so much, there's not a lot of flourish. And that's consistent with her writing on all these stare decisis stories. She actually likes grammar, right? Like there's two kinds of people that go into English. I always said, your artistic, creative writer, and then the people who wanted to get the grammar right. And she's a grammar teacher. So if you understand that mindset, then you can predict how she'll likely be. And in that context, neither the words follower or leader really aptly describe her.
Very interesting. All right. And now this might be a good segue, but I want to pill pusher. That's a Spoonerism for pill pusher. Oh, it says pill pusher. Not so sorry. 10,500 viewers, Robert. We broke 10,000 again. In this one video, you have now eclipsed the weekly viewership of CNN, MSNBC, and ABC combined. Congrats. Thank you very much. Okay, I think so. If anybody has any more questions, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to bridge to where the conservative defense will be of her, the Federalist Society has such a monopoly on conservative law that will help them in this context. There will be almost no conservative dissidents. I mean, I've been the only real, me and Cernovich have been the only dissidents out there, and I've got slapped around for it left and right and attacked left and right. So they know not to attack. People like Harmeet Dillon. People have asked why I won't, or why isn't there a debate between me and Harmeet Dillon? I'm happy to always debate her or anyone about this, but I'm not going to push someone like her to do it because all it does is set her up for risk. Because if she says anything adverse at all, now that Barrett's been picked, bye-bye the rest of her political legal career that she could ever have. So I'm not, I disagree with a whole bunch of conservative lawyers on this. I'm not going to go around outing them. Because all that does is put them in a very difficult position. And I'll voice my concerns. And people have told me to not voice them. That ain't gonna happen. The good, bad, or otherwise, I am who I am. So but I think from the rest of but it will be helpful to Barrett in this context because she won't have any conservative dissidents. She's likely to get almost no questions on the lockdown. So any questions that could hurt her with the right are likely to never even be asked in the Senate or in the court of public opinion at a big level. And that they'll come completely and uniformly to her defense. Now, I think the only mistake they've made is they've spent so much time preparing for a personal attack that they have not laid the groundwork for a policy attack in terms of defending her. So that's why the focus has been big family, adopted kids from Haiti, Catholic Church is normal, don't hate Catholics, etc. When that was never going to be the line of attack. They needed to prepare and say, the president rules on Obamacare, not the Supreme Court. The president's already said pre-existing conditions will be protected. All of these things they needed to be ahead of the curve is. Now, part of the problem is a whole bunch of people on the right, on the lawyer institutional media side, don't want pre-existing conditions to be there. That they are for the conservative position on environmental issues, employment issues, business issues, policing issues, military issues, etc. So I think that's where she won't have the best defense ready to go for. I think she'll have a partial defense by some of the smarter folks out there that will try to mount a defense for her. But I think there's going to be a disparity, just as there was with Bork. A lot of Republican senators didn't know how to come to the defense of Bork, in part because they were not prepared, and in part because most of them are not frankly, great legal minds that understand the court of public opinion. And lastly, it's because they often have the unpopular public opinion that the just judicial nominee does. To give an example, Senator Simpson asked one of the fatal questions for Bork. And he was the Republican defender of Bork. His last question was, why do you want to be on the Supreme Court, Justice Bork? They should have prepared the answer in advance. Bork had done something about standing up for civil rights and standing in the American tradition and refute all the allegations. Instead, Bork said, it will be an intellectual feast. And unfortunately, they had a political feast with that statement. So
I want to go. If that was recorded, I want to see that.
Oh, yes, it's unbelievable. So so I think Republicans are underprepared, and people have been critical of me for putting out a bunch of stuff on Twitter. The reason I'm putting it out there is almost all the institutional people in the media, in the Senate Judiciary Committee, on the right legal side, almost all of them follow me. So I'm putting that out there so they're aware and awake to what's coming and can actually defend it. Because even though I don't like Barrett, and put it this way, there'll be no tears if she fails to get confirmed, I'm trying to give them the best ability to defend her in case I'm mistaken about Barrett, because I see no evidence that they understand this yet. I keep seeing conservatives focus on a few of the wacky lefties on social media saying something stupid. I'm like, hey, okay, I get that will rally your base and whatnot. That's not how to win in the court of public opinion, because that's not where Democrats are going. And if you're not prepared to answer the pre-existing condition question, not prepared to answer the pro-business and all these other anti-environment, Black Lives Don't Matter, Me Too kind of questions that are coming to her, then she's going to get borked. And she has nowhere near the intellectual, in my view, level that Bork was at. And again, that's not an insult to her. I'm saying it's a different kind of intellect. Bork was built to answer those questions, and even he got hammered. That's my point. My point is not that Barrett's dumb or anything else. It's that she doesn't have the kind of mind to answer. As someone who's done lots and lots of oral arguments, I've been against a lot of lawyers, and I know which ones will be ready for oral argument and the ones that are not going to be ready for oral argument. You remember that second guy during the Covington thing? I mean, that poor boy, unfortunate for him. So
it's an interesting thing. People don't necessarily appreciate that you can criticize with the sincere intent to put on notice, and so that people can prepare for it.
If I wanted Barrett defeated, I wouldn't be putting any of this out there. I would just amass everything personally, take it to Democrats in the Senate, and help them bury her. That's not what I'm doing. So I recognize that I've always liked Scott Adams' view. He said, Scott Adams has said, I really am not certain of any of my beliefs. And I'll tell you why. It's because I've disagreed with myself so often over my life. And so I don't have any absolute certainty, particularly as the guessing Supreme Court nominees, as to where they're going to go. So I'm giving the conservatives where the left is coming, where the attack is coming, and where the more politically impactful attack is coming. I'm also doing it for internal curational purposes, just so I want to see this, read this, understand what it is, know which way it is for my own purposes, for my own knowledge, awareness. But my reason to share it at this stage, rather than just download it and stick it on the computer, is so that conservatives don't keep doing dumb stuff like skip with the hagiography, skip with pretending she's RBG. Don't compare her to RBG, because that's just going to enrage the left and get them more active. Make her own. I thought the mother, the kids, the maternal, all that was good. Focus on that side, on the personal side, and then get ready to respond on the policy side. And start planting those seeds now. Start debating that now, because it will get picked up, and whatever the best arguments are, I always want to say crowdfunding, but crowdsourcing of the best ideas will end up coming out if you actually back Barrett. But you've got to be able to answer the retorts. And a bunch of conservatives pretended that her decisions didn't say what they said, couldn't be interpreted the way they could be interpreted. And now they're already behind the 8 ball. They already lost the Sunday ties, and they're going to lose the Monday news cycle too.
Well, I think you've definitely sensitized people to the importance and her position vis-a-vis Jacobson, and I think a lot of people now are appreciating that. Isaac Castillo says, I was told that Trump hires, uses those skill sets, then replaces, rinse, repeats for each step of the project. Thoughts?
That just doesn't translate well to the White House and to the executive branch. That's part of the problem. But the second is he hasn't followed how he hired people in private practice. Look at who he hired for his campaign. He hired people based on who he liked on instincts. There are people who had no resumes for the most part. But look at who he's hired in the White House. Almost only people with resumes. and with pedigrees and backed by the respectable people. He's the kind of guy who used to break into the country club to get elected, like Rodney Dangerfield or Jackie Gleason in Caddyshack, first film reference. But unfortunately, he's let the country club govern who else gets to get in, and that's the problem. And so we'll see. But so the long and short of it, I think Republicans will do a subpar job of defending him. So then, in the court of public opinion, I think that it's going to be a losing battle. I think there'll be net negative the effect of Barrett in the court of public opinion, but how much that ultimately impacts the elections, I'll talk about tomorrow as to what the odds, how it may influence the odds. But in terms of the Senate, I do believe Barrett will get confirmed, but it's an open shoot because here's the thing. Collins is likely going to be a vote no, but that puts her in a tough, all the Republicans, it puts in a tough position that have close races. Because if they vote yes, if I'm right that Barrett will be successfully borked in the court of public opinion, then they're under massive pressure in these swing states to oppose her. But if they oppose her, they're going to really make the Trump base, particularly the religious part of Trump's base, very upset. So they're put in a difficult bind. So I think that assuming Trump doesn't withdraw her, and he'll only withdraw her if she totally collapses, I think likely she gets through, but it's going to be close. I think Collins and Murkowski will end up being no votes. And then for folks out there, the Democrats need to hold every Democrat in the Senate. Now, it looks like that's definitely going to happen based on statements that have come out. But then they need 4 more votes because even though it's 53-47, Pence would be the tiebreaker. So given that, now if they have Collins and Murkowski, that gives them 2. That leaves 2. Romney will vote for her. And the reason why is because she's a Romney conservative. She comes from that institutional, corporatist, authoritarian wing. People don't like authoritarian, business wing, whatever label you want to put on it. She comes from the Romney wing. And so Romney won't be a problem. The people who then become a question are Tillis, who's got a close race in North Carolina, Ernst, who's got a close race in Iowa, and anybody else who fancies themselves a moderate Republican or is in a state where the culture war favors Democrats. And they will all be risks. But so I think as of today, I would say that even forecasting that the Republicans are underprepared and the Democrats well prepared for their attacks, I think as of now, I believe she would pass by 1 vote in the Senate. That, in fact, Pence would be the tiebreaker, that one other Republican would join the first 2, and that it would be a 50-50 split, and that Pence will be the deciding factor and put her over the top. Right now, she is scheduled for a vote literally the week before Election Day.
It's amazing.
You talk about crazy. So it looks like we'll have 2 weeks about a week or so of hearings, a week of debates on the Senate floor, then the next week her vote.
Okay, that's a long time, and we'll finish up this topic with this question here. Craig Lino 504. What is the bigger threat? That she will not get appointed, that she will betray Trump in his effort in getting reelected, or she will be turned on Trump's base once appointed?
The third. If she turns out to be a 5th vote for lockdowns, folks, like even the folks that say, hey, well, she's had some good rulings on Second Amendment and some other context, First Amendment churches in certain contexts. Folks, there are no constitutional rights in the cases of lockdown logic. So lockdown law is that all constitutional rights are suspended. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Eighth Amendment, all of them gone. So anybody that's for lockdowns is someone I consider too dangerous to let near the court. That's why I opposed her nomination, and that's why I will not be supporting her nomination. But my actions currently aren't meant to be one way or the other. It's just to say, let's watch this debate, see what happens, and make people informed about it, as informed as possible, so they can make their own decisions about whether they like her or not, whether they're for her or not, and act accordingly. I'm not a partisan. I've never been a registered Republican in my entire life. I've never been a registered Democrat in my entire life. I've been a registered independent my entire life. And so folks who think I should be on a team that just cheerleads and lives in an echo chamber, that's not my nature or personality. Definitely not when it comes to the Supreme Court of the United States. So but again, if you have any hate, share it in the comments below. And the more informed it is, the more humorous it is, I will respond. The dumber that it is, I may mock it. So it's up to you.
Okay, amazing. And now this has been a long one on this. Let's go, because I can't find the super chat, and I took a picture of it. I just can't find it. Let's move on to Flynn, because I've got questions.
I was going to say a brief addendum before we get to Flynn.
Please.
As to the impact of the Supreme Court for folks on public policy, that second component. Remember, the Supreme Court has often been essential, and this is why this is likely to be very contested. They see her as the fifth vote, which is a rare occasion to happen in the Supreme Court. Bork was really the last most analogous example to this, the Supreme Court's decisions on the national bank and on the rights of Native Americans completely changed what happened in the 1810s and 20s. It led to the Trail of Tears. It led to the establishment of a financial institution against public will. The decision of Dred Scott in 1850 birthed the Civil War. Without the Dred Scott decision, we likely don't get there. The Plessy v. Ferguson decision and the slaughterhouse cases in the 1880s and 1890s late 1870s combined collectively gutted the ability of civil rights to exist for the South from 1875 to 1965. The Supreme Court decisions in Jacobson and in Buck and in Korematsu said the government could use a public health or war or other emergency exception to suspend all of our constitutional liberties. So they've had major and then the 1948 to 1968 Supreme Court was one of the greatest civil liberties courts in the history of America. Our rights of free speech were mostly determined by that court in that time frame, by those courts. Our Miranda rights came up during that time period. Rights against involuntary confessions arose during that time period. The whole beginning of enforcing the Constitution through the 14th Amendment against the states didn't really begin until 1947. And then with a lot of great decisions between then and 1968. And then since 1968, we've had a court that's really been a détente kind of court. It's gone back and forth on key areas. It's gone back and forth ideologically. It's often been 5-4 decisions. And sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. Sometimes it's the Democratic nominee favoring the constitutional right. Sometimes it's the Republican nominee favoring the constitutional right, and vice versa. Justice Breyer gutting punitive damages in the BMW case, removing the power of due process to meaningfully protect jury trial rights, being an example of where Democrats are against constitutional rights. Voting against the Heller decision, trying to prevent gun rights to be meaningfully and a self-defense to be constitutionally enshrined. On the other hand, Scalia leading the way on the Coco decision to extend a Fourth Amendment to these new invasive technologies that allow them to spy inside your home, but not anymore thanks to him constitutionally. Justice Thomas leading the fight against testimonial privilege to expand that to the right to not be forced to use your body against your will in a coercive inquisitional way. He's still a dissenter on that, but he reinvigorated the entire constitutional debate about it. First Amendment and free speech decisions, a lot of them issued that were followed up by Justice Roberts, who was on the right side, in saying that we do not consider an idea subject to state sanction, whether by lawsuit or by the state. And then on a lot of bad decisions that have said the Fourth Amendment can't lead to suppression of evidence, such that there's no remedy, that there's no right to meaningful access to a grand jury in the Fifth Amendment context, issued by Justice O'Connor, that the Sixth Amendment right to counsel doesn't extend to the forfeiture of fees or forfeiture amounts so that you can't afford to have your own counsel. The Eighth Amendment right against excessive bail, reduced and restricted to be effectively fangless in the modern era. The ability to kidnap people from foreign jurisdictions without proper extradition procedures. So we've had a mixture, but we're about to face a new turning timetable where we're either going to have a great Supreme Court kind of history like we did from 1948 to 1968 in protecting constitutional rights and liberties, or we're going to go back to the pre-1920 Supreme Court, pre-1930 Supreme Court, pre-1940 Supreme Court, which was a Supreme Court that was mostly negative in our history. Bad on issues of banks, Indian rights, slavery, bad on issues of war, bad on issues of financial bank and financial empowerment, bad on civil rights and civil liberties and constitutional protections. That's why this debate about Barrett will be so consequential, because she has the power to reshape the court more than any judicial nominee in our history.
Okay. And on that note, I can see the crowd wants to talk Flynn. Now, I'm just going to go back to the one super chat that I just saw, which is a good intro to it. Everybody knows what's going on in Flynn. I'm not doing the summary, except to say that, okay, no joke, but there were more exculpatory documents that were released. It was the fifth release of exculpatory documents. I'm going to read this, but then before we answer it, I'm going to ask my own question, because I have one question that's just been driving me nuts. Mark Insinga says, are FBI, CIA analysts and agents in Flynn investigation in jeopardy professionally or legally for getting professional liability insurance, which, as I recall, requires affirming you don't know of any potential vulnerability. We're going to get to this because I got my own question on that. It's like you can't get insurance when you know that the issue of liability has occurred. But let's get there in a second because I would have thought they would have been covered just by virtue of their employment. It's the fifth Brady disclosure of exculpatory documentation that has come from the government. Why is more stuff still coming out? Well, why did it not all come out on the 3rd or the 4th or the 2nd? How is it now? We're 4 years in, but how is it now just another tranche? Is it like the government itself that is doing this to show that it still has documents, or is there some procedure that is explaining away why it didn't all happen 2 disclosures ago?
This is because Attorney General Barr has far more influence currently than obviously he did previously over the course of the case. So I think what's going to happen, and we can even get in a preview for the hearing is this week, isn't it?
The hearing is Tuesday. It is either tomorrow or Tuesday, 11 o'clock, the 29th. And
wow,
it's going to be live on the internet. It's
the debate is Tuesday night. I mean, what a crazy, and when we got the SCOTUS thing, man, what a crazy time to be alive as a lawyer.
I sort of want to do like a live reaction to it, or just watch it live and, comment. It's going to be, it's going to be amazing just to have Judge Emmett Sullivan sitting there. He's going to get chewed out by the lawyers, and you see it by the last line of Sidney Powell's supplemental argument brief. They're not saying nice things about him. They're calling his conduct egregious, bias, unjustifiable to his face, and they're going to be making arguments in front of him. It's going to be beautiful. But yeah, so why are we still seeing new documents? How did this not all get disclosed yet?
This is Barr punishing Sullivan for not dismissing the case. That's what this is. So people think, oh, it's a super secret plot of Sullivan to play 4D chess to secretly get this intel and info.
Mm-hmm.
No, it isn't, folks, because go back and look at his 73 opinion where he lied about Sidney Powell and refused to require the government disclose any of this. This is Attorney General Barr. I was up at the Hillsdale College event 2 weeks ago where he was at the dinner with me. And like I said, nice guy you can meet in person. But he made clear 2 things. One was that over most cases, he had no power and couldn't get people to obey. He felt legally he had the power, but he couldn't get them to do what he wanted them to do. And he was frustrated. And that's why he gave that whole speech about line prosecutors listen to the boss. Line prosecutors are not the boss. It's because he can't get them to do what he wants. And it's a problem on the Durham case, which we can get to later. But on this one, he personally appointed the person that is running the Flynn case. And what he's doing is what a smart attorney general or prosecutor would do who wants a case dismissed, is they would constantly leak information that hurts the government and helps the defendant to remind a hostile, intractable judge that they better get rid of the case or it's going to be more dirt, more dirt, more dirt, more dirt.
How much? Then the other thing. So it is interesting because that was my reflex instinct observation, whatever, for lack of a better word, was that you have 2 different DOJs in this now. You have the Obama DOJ that was conducting this prosecution, and now you have Trump's DOJ, who's basically prosecuting the former prosecution. And so they have no problem releasing this information to show misconduct because it was a misconduct of a previous administration to some extent, and they want to show it, and they want to show as much of it as they can. Do you think they have anything? I guess it's a pure conjecture question, but is there more damning stuff, and how much more damning can it possibly get?
Oh, it can definitely get more damning. It could be prosecuted. So far, they have not revealed the fact that what Mueller's team knew and didn't know. Instead, they've just said, here's all the stuff that was there, and look at how bad it is for the government. But they have not, produced internal documents that show Mueller's prosecutors knew about it and lied to the judge yet.
And then deleted their phones after they were done with the investigation. Is that where we're thinking they actually went in terms of deleting all that data?
Oh, it's just because they understood never in writing and always in cash. They understood the principle that the best. How do they track people? By what they text and email. So they used it as an effective communication mechanism when they were in charge. Once they knew they were no longer in charge, it was going to be delete and shred, delete and shred, delete and shred.
It's okay. So it's mind-boggling. Now there's 2 things for everybody who doesn't know. More documents came out, more internal text messages. We don't know. I don't know if we know that they were between Page and Stroke, but they were between Secret Service agents talking about how Trump was right. This is basically sort of a political prosecution. They're scrambling to find anything to justify the claim. You have handwritten
They're
notes.
manufacturing charges. It's the big explosive part of this. What for folks who haven't yet watched Viva's video, watch it. He does a good breakdown of it. The is twofold. One, that almost all of these charges were clearly just entrapment charges. This was very much a show me the man, please God help me find the crime. And they just had out such a hard time finding. It's amazing how innocent Flynn must be, because it took them. They couldn't even conjure up a crime. That's like, I mean, they put this guy under microscopic review, and they just kept running into stonewall after stonewall after stonewall because the guy was so innocent.
Years, and then it came up with, this is where I have the biggest issue, and I don't understand how. I don't understand how mainstream media can't report it, and I still have trouble convincing people that it's egregious. You have Joe Biden, who had previously said, I don't remember anything about who, I don't know if it was unmasking, but he said, I don't remember, anything about Flynn. And he may very well have forgotten. And I'm not saying that as a cynical joke about his state of mind. He may very well have forgotten that he floated the idea of the Logan Act, but it turns out that he was the one, according to Peter Strzok's handwritten notes, VP Logan Act ? And they're going to pick out this law that's 221 years old, has seen all of 2 people prosecuted for it, both of whom were acquitted in the 1800s. And you have them saying, try this. And that was the sole basis on which they got something of a false statement out of Flynn in an interview that was questionably lawful in and of itself in the manner in which it was conducted, but ought never have been conducted in the first place, because the investigation should have been closed. How is that not a bigger deal, or is it a bigger deal and we just have the media running cover for Biden?
So I had to fix my camera there. Everybody can make their jokes also in the comments below. Those will be well deserved. I mean, I'm technologically incompetent, though I'm not a boomer. In my defense, I'm not a boomer.
There were a lot of accusations of boomer in our last stream when we lost the feed. But I'm not blowing it out of proportion. That is it's borderline over the top, and media is running cover.
It's the worst case ever that I've witnessed. There are worse cases in history, but this was entirely intended to entrap and conjure up a case that didn't exist. It's what famous Stalin's investigator Beria said: "Show me the man, I'll find you the crime." And Flynn's record was so impeccable that they kept trying. They had to manufacture crimes. The Logan Act is something only twice used in history. It's a joke. It has constitutional problems with it. And the person who ran with this after Biden recommended it was someone else who was in that January 5th meeting, the meeting that I was writing in February of 2017 saying this was the case. And I got attacked by Dan Abrams and other people for pointing it out. The time has vindicated what I said then and what we've talked about on this show for months, which is the eternal truth. Number one, Sally Yates is corrupt. Sally Yates is the one who ran with the Logan Act case. It was clearly bogus from day one. Also, Sally Yates, by the way, was the one going after the blackmail theory they reference in the notes, because her pitch to Pence was, we think Flynn maybe has been blackmailed by the Russians, or he could become blackmailed by the Russians, because he wouldn't possibly want anyone to know he was talking to the Russians when he was the incoming national security advisor.
So that's the other thing is people don't even know what the Logan Act is, but I read the history of it. I still don't really understand the reason for it historically, but apparently some non-elected official went to France to speak with elected French officials to quell some sort of conflict with the United States. People didn't like it. He was an unelected official going. Flynn is coming in as the national security advisor. How does that not act as a bar to any potential application of the Logan Act on its face? Am I misunderstanding something?
No, you're not. And in fact, the whole Logan Act there was a great fear at the time of our founding about the risk that the American leaders would be co-opted by European royalty. So that was the great concern. So that's where the emoluments clause came from in the Constitution, and that's where the Logan Act came as a statute. And because we were such a young country, the big concern was that people would think somebody represents the country who doesn't. So that's where they're like, okay, you can't go out communicating as if you represent the government to foreign countries. because we don't want to get stuck in some deal with a foreign country because you weren't really the agent of the government when you did it. And we don't want you ensnared with some European royalty betraying our country. So, I mean, that's where the citizenship requirement of the presidency was all about. It was fear that some foreign royal would come in and co-opt the presidency of the United States. And they wanted to preclude that by requiring you be a natural-born citizen of the United States. So it was obsession about foreign royalty. It has no application in the modern age and major First Amendment problems with it even ever being prosecuted. It was a joke that it was pursued.
No, imagine if it were, people are saying that you're making the camera worse, but imagine people trying to go after someone for a Logan Act violation for a tweet a private citizzen makes to, I don't know, Putin or some president of another country. Yeah, it's madness.
It'd be a violation of core First Amendment rights to enforce the Logan Act against anyone. Is my view, and there's a lot of people who believe that. That's why no one's tried prosecuting it in a long, long time.
I mean, just as a pure matter academic question, how do you get a law stricken from the books in the States? Like, would you just have that? You would just go to Congress and have that repealed, or
effectively, you have to wait till you're prosecuted. So that's the only way you can really contest that, because its enforcement mechanism is only criminal. So only in a criminal prosecution could you challenge it, and that's why they never bring it. Congress should have the guts to reverse it and just undo it. But there's a lot of laws that are like this on the books, and when their remedy is criminal, there's nothing you can do about it because they never prosecute, and so no one can challenge its constitutionality.
Interesting. And now Norin Moss says, can Flynn sue and vindicated? Now we've touched on this before, but the short answer is no. He might be able to get his legal fees back from prior counsel who were conflicted and gave improper advice.
Right.
My question though is, in Sullivan's order, there was a Brady order. I'm not sure why there would have to be a specific Brady order when there's an ongoing obligation, but since it's quite clear that the government has not respected that order, what are the sanctions against the government for violating its Brady obligations?
Well, there really isn't any. Unfortunately, this is where the Supreme Court hasn't been great. They haven't afforded a meaningful civil remedy when this occurs in most contexts. So mostly your remedy is always within the criminal case. You can get sometimes a new trial. You can get a delay in a trial date. You can compel information to be disclosed that has been previously withheld. But you can violate Brady as much as you want. And unless, in some states, you can sue if you're innocent and get certain amounts of money. But usually that amount of money is low, but that's only for actual prison time. In Flynn's case, the Supreme Court has effectively precluded any remedy for these kind of violations outside of the criminal case context.
And it's not like you can I guess you could hold a government official in contempt. Contempt would really be the only meaningful remedy for a government official not failing to respect a court order.
Well, theoretically, the government could bring criminal actions against the prosecutor. I mean, they did in the case of two of the prosecutors involved in the Ted Stevens case that made Judge Sullivan famous in the first place, because there's criminal violations there, there's civil rights violations there, there's ethical violations there, but it's basically up to the executive branch to do anything about it. And that's kind of the problem. The executive branch very rarely disciplines its own. They usually reward executive branch employees who break the rules. They don't punish them. That's at least the history. If you're a policeman or a prosecutor and you break the rules and get caught, they don't really get mad. If you break the rules and get away with it and it helps the executive branch win, they reward you. So just as a matter of incentives, your incentive as a police officer or prosecutor is to break the rules because you're more likely to be rewarded than punished for doing so.
So, and just to go over the most egregious ones of the egregious texts, you have Andy McCabe was it in the Senate hearings? He has handwritten notes and it says open, everything, closed, nothing, blackmail, not the strongest argument or not the strongest theory. Now I had to go to Twitter for this because I didn't know. I mean, I thought maybe they were pontificating, blackmailing Flynn himself, but first reaction was the wrong one. The idea was that whether or not the Russians have intel on Flynn that could compromise him and make him susceptible to blackmail. Okay, what did the open, everything, closed, nothing mean? Or what were the first two, open and closed? What does that mean?
I think that was a result of the January 5th meeting and led to certain things after that, which was that here's what happened. 2 days before that, the line FBI agent said everything about Flynn should be closed, including Operation Razor, any role that he has with Crossfire Hurricane, any FBI background check for him to be appointed, that they had looked at everything and said there's nothing there. And I think they're actually planning on doing that until Obama and Biden pushed back at the January 5th meeting and told Comey, no, we want to go. We want more done. Biden recommends the Logan Act. Sally Yates runs off with that. Comey goes back to the FBI people, including McCabe, Strzok, Page, and Priestap, and says, okay, we got to double down, open up everything, see what we can find on this guy. Or we have to make up something. And that's where they felt such stress. They're like, this is a joke. This is a disaster. This is an embarrassment.
And just to situate everybody, we're January 2017. This is after the election, prior to being sworn in, where they're saying, when was the insurance policy stroke message with Page? Was that was before?
That was summer of 2016. That's when they first opened everything up.
So, I mean, this plays out exactly like Trump gets elected. He was the wild card. Nobody expected it. They wanted a Hillary presidency, and this is in the text messages. They're upset about it. They are now investigating Flynn to get some dirt on him. You know, we have the notes that were disclosed in one of the previous disclosures, set him up, get him to lie so we can get him fired or prosecuted. They have nothing. They're on the verge of closing the investigation. They didn't, but for their own incompetence within the FBI, which we now know from Strzok's prior texts. Then they go meet with O. And this is where, like, I'm reading these texts and I think this is a joke. They say, how'd the meeting with O go? And they say, you mean Obama? And this is in the text message back and forth. Yeah, the president. And then the next line is, do you like Justin Bieber? Which I didn't understand. Maybe it was just like an obvious.
I was ask you that. I was like, how does this relate to Justin Bieber? It's like, the QAnon people are going to have a field day with that. Right?
I think it was just such an obvious question. They're asking the equally obvious question because everybody hates Justin Bieber. That's what I thought. Yes. So they go meet with O and Biden, who are now they're voted out of office. They're no longer going to be the political party in power. And then Biden floats the Logan Act as if I'm not an attack on Biden's intelligence or anything. I don't think many people understand the Logan Act, but floats something that's totally intangible to go after Flynn, which they continue to do, and then have the infamous meeting, which ultimately led to the false statement. What they qualified as a false statement, but ultimately they said no, we didn't think it was an equivocal statement anyhow, and was not false. It was an I don't recall. And that's it. And then I still go to Twitter and I see people saying, yeah, he pleaded guilty twice. He's guilty. What more is there? Like, you don't understand. What do you think? There's going to be more disclosures or no more disclosures? Sullivan's dismissing this on Tuesday.
Originally I thought he would, do a long lecture, take pre-pot shots, ask rhetorical questions, and then hold on it for 30 to 45 days just to see what happens with the election. But now I lean to put it this way. If these disclosures had the effect that I believe Barr intended them to have on Sullivan, 50% chance now that he dismisses verbally on Tuesday, just to stop all these further disclosures from embarrassing Obama. Because my belief is that some of what Sullivan is doing is to protect Obama in particular, given a range of Obama's public comments, triggering Sullivan's public reactions on a lot of these issues. If that is the case, then they're getting closer and closer to pointing the finger directly at Obama and the leaks that they're putting out there. And so I think that there'll be maximum pressure on Sullivan to get rid of this case quicker rather than slower. And I think that's why Barr and Barr's person put this information in Sidney Powell's hands for public disclosure right on the eve of the hearing.
Well, and the fact that this particular disclosure, it was the one that came on Wednesday, mentioned Joe Biden, and there's going to be the presidential debates that night. I'm going to read this super chat. Jason L. It's a beautiful super chat. Irrelevant, but on September 21st, we welcomed our third child, Kelsey Candace, into the world. She came in roughly 3 hours after your 9:20 stream ended. I watched it from the delivery room. #dedication. Thank you very much, Jason, and congratulations. Stephen Cannon says, will Trump make Flynn director of the FBI after this? That would be fun to watch. Now, this is my question. Like, I don't know how you can make up for this. I know people who think Trump is playing 4D chess is saying this is the long game with Flynn. Is he tarnished to the point where he cannot be used in politics again, or is he emboldened? Is that a word? Is he even more made for his role in government once this is over?
I think that the whole net effect of this is that it's net positive to him ultimately, in that he's experienced the problems of a criminal prosecutorial process going awry, and so he more so than anyone is well suited to make sure it doesn't happen to other people. I think there are other issues that he would have to overcome if he were to get renominated. There's going to be there's still the same institutional opposition is still present. So that's the hurdle he would still have for any position that requires Senate consent. For any position that doesn't, and I hope Trump does put him back in a position of influence, then yes, Trump should put him back in. Clearly still one of Trump's most effective people, and he's a daily reminder of how the system went crazy in going after Trump and breaking its own rules.
Topo Musical says, crazy that Flynn can't sue for civil rights violations to at least recover the cost of his legal bills. Why could he not? Why would there not be a civil rights violation here?
It's my disagreement with Scalia and the court. Essentially, the compromise was supposed to be that if you have meaningful criminal remedies in the criminal cases, then they were not going to give you civil rights remedies on the other side. But they later used the possible existence of civil rights remedies to start removing the criminal law remedies, and then they went back and gutted the civil remedies too. So this is where the right side of the court, the Republican nominees, have generally been bad. They have generally tried to find ways to deny people civil rights remedies. It's just reality. So I think for a lot of your patriot populist type conservatives, they often don't know this because they think of it in the Second Amendment context or other First Amendment church contexts where Republican appointees have been very good. They've been, and sometimes in the takings context, they've been very good, but they've been quite bad in the Fourth Amendment context. They've gone to great lengths to say that suppression is not a remedy in the criminal context, and then turn around and say that there is no civil remedy available to you anyway, because supposedly there's a criminal remedy, though they just gutted that too. So that's why this on this side, why Flynn doesn't have a remedy is mostly due to Republican nominees since 1970, frankly.
All right. And now I should also say, in general, occasionally I bring up a wrong super chat because the one I want to click on has changed, and then I bring up one totally unrelated. I am not making any market recommendations to buy Bitcoin or whatever the second word of that was. So and if I bring up a totally insulting super chat, it's not because I am approving of it. It's probably because I went to click on one and the whole thing went up and I clicked the wrong one. Okay. So what else? I mean, so the Flynn hearings on Tuesday, it's going to be glorious. It probably will not last 5 hours like the Court of Appeals.
No.
Yeah, that was right. And then the government filed a supplemental brief, which was only an interview with Barnett. Now, so this is a question I had, couldn't get an answer for it in time for the video. Who is examining the former case agent William Barnett this year, September of this year, and why are they interviewing him now?
Two reasons. One, it's part of Durham's team. And the fact of how slow it is a little bit of a problem, in my view. Yeah, because your point is well taken. Why wasn't he talked to a year and a half ago? Probably the same reason it took forever for them to indict Kleinsmith and then give him a sweetheart deal. They're slow playing this. Just for folks who want to compare, I mean, today it's Maria. I never could pronunciate her last name on Fox. Came out Baritismo.
But you're going to get in trouble for pronunciating again. But
yes, definitely. I'm going to get brutalized. So apologies in advance. I love Italians, by the way. I love Catholics too. And so the net effect of it was, well, maybe not the Inquisition part of the Catholic Church, but the net effect is that I think, I lost my whole train of thought.
Who was it? It was why Barnett was not interviewed a year and a half ago.
So I think I think Durham's played it gone slow deliberately. I know Maria came out and said that there's not only is there's going to be I'm just going with Maria. Maria said, great name. I love Maria. The Ave Maria. Great. I'm not sure if that's the right the song, but I think it is. The net effect of it is she said that there's going to be no indictments from Durham and no report. He's not even going to issue a report, which Barr has been promising Trump that there would be an election report from Durham. Apparently, he's not even going to do a report. Now, that could be a misleading thing to back off Democrats and whatnot. But, I don't think Maria would come be the one to report that if that were the case. So I think that's why they've gone slow, and they're just now catching up to basic people that they should have always investigated and interviewed, that it looks bad. Now, here's my hunch. The guy doing the Flynn case is being directed in part by Barr, wanted to embarrass what the government did, and I think he's calling up the Durham team and saying, "Oh, has this person been talked to? I assume you've talked to. Why don't we have this file?" And then the CYA, they run and do the interview. So I think that's what's happening.
Timing is going to work out as well, because it might make for the good October surprise. And we'll see, whether or not it was planned, whether or not they had the info, and and Jay Mill says, would a pardon have made it more difficult for Flynn to sue? I mean,
no, actually, a pardon can help. I mean, but the civil rights violations are civil rights violations. So a pardon can only have a positive influence on that. It can't have a negative influence on that. So but the problem is the U.S. Supreme Court has basically made it almost impossible to sue for anything that goes wrong in the criminal process.
Well, one thing which is obvious is that a pardon, setting that question aside, would have not allowed this information to come to light. If Trump had pardoned him 3 months ago, I imagine none of this information comes to light. It's a done deal, and everyone goes their separate ways. It's almost. I wonder if Flynn. I mean, I knowing the toll that litigation takes and prosecution takes on an individual, I wonder if there's any bit of satisfaction that he's getting now, seeing all of this stuff come to light, and anybody whose mind is not closed to begin with, now seeing exactly not just what happened to Flynn, what was being done to the Trump administration from before he took office, after he was elected. It's someone said it's mind blowing. It is Spygate. Here, that's where it is. With a dollar sign. It's mind blowing. Okay, we didn't miss anything with that. It was a curious thing, because they examined William Barnett. I think it was September of this year. It was
yes.
a week ago. And this guy says he was the former case agent, says was never convinced by anything. The Logan Act never applied. Was totally unconvinced by it. And it's more of what we already knew, but my goodness, it's damning. Okay, I think we're good on this. Let's move on. We're going to run out of time, but we know Kyle Rittenhouse. People want to know what's going on. Robert, I sent you a link that somebody sent me, but I think you probably already knew the news. New counsel, new appearance has been filed, and it was R&R Group. If anybody knows the full name, it's another law channel, very good sort of podcasty format, not ADHD editing a la Viva Fry, but they were saying that they don't know if it's a replacement or if it's working with, or if it's a substitution or the local working with. Do you have any details, or do you have any knowledge?
It's not a substitution. So the Illinois extradition hearing was held this week. And what's happened is they found a Wisconsin lawyer to help out in Wisconsin if the case ever gets to Wisconsin. It's the same lawyer that was disclosed as being involved last week by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. That article disclosed what I'd been telling people, but it confirmed it. 2 high-profile Wisconsin criminal defense lawyers quit the team because they can't deal with John Pierce and Lynn Wood. A third lawyer, who's sort of a solid guy from doesn't have the same big reputation as these other lawyers, doesn't have the same pedigree as them, but is a good, solid, everyday criminal defense lawyer in Racine, has agreed to help out on the case. How much so is unclear, or what his role is unclear, because he has not publicly discussed it much at all. And so that's what's happening on the Wisconsin side. The Illinois extradition hearing was held this week. And for folks that don't know, extradition in the United States is mostly standardized because there's a constitutional requirement to extradite between the states, and there's a federal statute that has a role that basically almost all state laws have to conform to. And in Illinois, if you are charged with a life imprisonment, if you're charged with a crime for which you could serve life imprisonment in the state requesting extradition, you can't get any bail. So as long as he's under an extradition arrest in Illinois, he cannot get bail. He's stuck in jail. Now, the ways you can object to extradition are twofold. Technically you're filing a writ of habeas corpus, but it's more of a procedural component because it's pursuant to the statute. And what they did is they statutorily codified the writ of habeas corpus that exists already under ancient English law that's been borrowed into the United States. And what that means is my body is being illegally held captive. So it's a request to the court to get my corpus.
Show me the body.
Huh?
Show me the body in the Latin term.
That's exactly right.
My advice is, people may not like this, but be very weary before traveling to countries that don't have a habeas corpus rule, because they can put you in an interrogation room and you'll never be heard from again, and you have no right to be heard from again.
And if you're a corrupt CIA regional security officer, deputy U.S. Marshal at the embassy in Panama, don't send a fax to the high-ranking people at the Justice Department when you're about to kidnap someone illegally outside of those habeas corpus rules by saying we're about to do the habeas grabus, which actually came up in an actual case of mine. So the habeas grabus, the highest ranks of the Justice Department, you should have watched their face on cross-examination, because it's kind of like the bar thing, but it was the judge was acting as the intermediary. So I got a bunch of discovery they didn't know I had. So they lied right on the stand. I would say, did you receive something like this? They're like, no, I don't know where you got that. I'm like, here's the facts. And they're like, oh, crap. So a lot of folks got demoted. A lot of people suddenly resigned after that case. But the nature of the animal. So you file a writ, but you can only challenge it in very limited grounds. Like the extradition proceedings with Assange have a lot more grounds that you can challenge on than you can between the states within the United States. So the U.S. Supreme Court has issued a string of decisions going back to the late 1800s that basically make it almost impossible to challenge any extradition request unless you can show there was and I'll preview for folks what my defense was going to be for Rittenhouse. The one way you can defend an extradition, normally you can always defend an extradition if you're not the person being extradited. So I was once held up in a New York airport for 6 hours, and then they finally came to me and they said, you're not a 47-year-old African-American. It's like, nope, I don't identify as such either, just me. And so but they had the wrong Robert Barnes. So if you're the wrong person, you can of course contest it. There has to actually be legitimate paperwork. It can't be some local cop threw you in jail on a bogus extradition request. But all of that will be easily met in most cases, and will be here in Rittenhouse. But what he could object to is one main thing: that what's a crime in Wisconsin, the behavior described might be a crime in Wisconsin, but not a crime in Illinois. And this was my creative theory for challenging extradition of Rittenhouse, which is that self-defense rules in Illinois are broader, wider, and different. Well, not so much broader, but can be broader in certain contexts applicable to him than it is in Wisconsin. Here's the big one. You can use all kinds of deadly force, even sometimes just for property or just to avoid a forced felony in certain contexts in Illinois that you can't in Wisconsin, that are applicable to his case. So I would have made that argument. Now, procedurally, the way you do it is you file the writ of habeas corpus. It could have been filed right away. He was arrested 6 weeks ago, or however long ago it was, over a month. Unfortunately, no one showed up for his first hearing. And at the second hearing, John Pierce shows up and still hasn't filed anything, says he hasn't even requested the paperwork, needs time, and he asked for another month delay. So
meanwhile, Rittenhouse is sitting. Sorry, I'm shaking my computer. Meanwhile, Rittenhouse is sitting in a jail in. I don't know why I'm having a block here. He's in a jail in Illinois,
Antioch, Illinois.
Okay,
where he's from, little small town, not far, right across the Wisconsin border, about 60 minutes, 90 minutes from Chicago, only 20 minutes or so from Kenosha. And so he's not. You could see the judge's reaction and other people's reaction. One, they were ambushed by the request, and they think it's amateur hour. And the way in which Pierce talks about, writ, we have a writ of habeas, we got a writ of habeas corp. There's no reason to try to. He sounded like someone who had just read it the night before, hasn't done it before, and so it didn't. And so the judge shot him down almost right away and said, "Look, now you got about 10 days to get this done," because he didn't say publicly you should have already done this, but that's where he was going. Now, let me give you just a hypothesis for folks out there. A theory of what, if you've been following Lynn Wood, and apparently there's more claims been made by the lawyers that were always his partners against him in court beyond what were previously made. Injunction request, more affidavits, more declarations, more details. But let's say you think that Chief Justice Roberts is going to be replaced by President Trump because the QAnon army is going to lock him up in Guantanamo after the election. You might be telling someone like Rittenhouse, and he made some weird comments after the hearing when people were being critical about how it's better off where Rittenhouse is, which doesn't make any sense. All this does is delay the trial and extend the time period in which he's locked up and can't get bail. because remember, he cannot get bail under extradition laws in Illinois because it's a life imprisonment charge that Wisconsin has charged him with. He can get bail in Wisconsin. And if he's not going to get bail, the longer he's in prison and jail, the worse. For him in particular, but also for his case. Said, let's say, hypothetically, it would not surprise me if someone like Wood or Pierce, given what they don't know about the law, is telling Rittenhouse and like they're doing they're on the political circuit. They went up to the Kenosha Republican Party with Rittenhouse's mom helping to raise money. But it's not clear that any of it is going to Rittenhouse or the mom. They may be telling Rittenhouse that he's going to get pardoned by Trump after the election. And I've had people ask me whether the other reason why I suspect that could be the case is because I'm getting people asking me that question from the QAnon world.
We've discussed this before, though. These are state charges.
The president cannot pardon for state charges. He cannot pardon Rittenhouse. So if Rittenhouse or his mom are being told that President Trump can pardon him and just wait until after the election and let's just buy time and keep you in Illinois until they can pardon you, it's a lie. Because Rittenhouse cannot be pardoned by the president. The president can only pardon for federal charges. He cannot pardon for state charges. That's why Manafort, they were going to re-prosecute him in New York.
Craig Leno 504 says, can the federal government intervene in Rittenhouse case? Cans to a local prosecution or prosecute a corrupt local prosecution? So, I mean, on what basis could the feds get involved? Only a civil rights violation?
Well, that's my other concern that led me to this hypothesis was Pierce made public statements about federal law or federal courts getting involved. That can't happen either. Like, here's what can happen in some cases. In some cases, you're held on a state extradition warrant by a federal court or in a federal facility. And in that context, you can file your writ of habeas corpus in federal court. That has no application here. I suspect that's when I started thinking, I was like, what in the world is he talking about? And then it started dawning, and then someone started talking about habeas corpus. I was like, well, that doesn't apply in this context. He's held by the state. He's held in a state facility. A federal judge cannot release someone from a state facility generally. That's applicable when it's a federal facility generally. So at this stage, they can do other things in post-execution, post-judgment, execution of the judgment. Then sometimes they can take action in federal court. But that's under particular statutes and other legal relief and legal remedies that are not applicable here. So short answer is state court has its own jurisdiction. So a federal prosecutor cannot stop a state prosecution. A federal prosecutor could also prosecute Rittenhouse too, could add to it before, during, or after the state case because double jeopardy doesn't apply, but they can't remove jurisdiction from the state court. It's very rare, unique circumstances where certain kind of civil rights are being violated, but it's totally inapplicable here and generally under a range of abstention doctrines. They won't even get involved when it is a rogue case on the civil rights side of the equation, when it's clearly outside of the sovereignty or the jurisdiction of the state. That's not present here. So I think Rittenhouse is being given very, very bad advice and clearly being ill-served to this day. He does have some extradition defenses, but they should have been raised earlier. I don't know how good the defenses are that will be raised.
Are there time limits on those defenses? Like they have to be raised within the first 30 days following the charges being pressed or following the arrest? Like
historically, what happens is you bring those charges within 14 days of the arrest. And the idea is that they make a decision within 30 days. If it was me, I would have ambush style. That's how I would have done it. I would have done it the very first day he was brought in. I would have shown up and made the argument right there verbally, and then cited a couple of cases because prosecutors are totally unprepared for that kind of thing. I think the Illinois prosecutors admitted they hadn't had anyone fight extradition in 20 years. So and instead all they did was preview for them that they were going to fight it, not have a sophisticated argument for it, buy more time, and given the kind of comments Pierce is making, I think they're banking on something crazy that can't constitutionally happen anyway. So unfortunately, Rittenhouse is still screwed at the moment.
So he's still in jail. What new counsel? What are the next steps? Do you know what the next steps are in the file?
They said they will file a habeas petition. We'll see if they do. Then there'll be another hearing, I think, on October 9th or 10th, if I recall right. And if the judge denies their request to stop the extradition. Then they can appeal that decision to the Illinois Court of Appeals and all of the Illinois Supreme Court. And that may be what they do, but the only reason to do that is if they really came up with a creative, compelling argument that could work. I don't really anticipate that happening. If it's just to buy time, it hurts Rittenhouse because it's longer that he's stuck in jail and longer that he may ultimately be stuck in jail. If he is extradited and they don't appeal it, then he'll be transferred up to Kenosha County Jail, where they can then start the bail process and go from there. So the lawyer who's involved, like I said, quality lawyer. But I heard from more Wisconsin lawyers this week who said they would not get involved with the case as long as Wood and Pierce are involved. That they would love to help the kid, willing to help for cheap, but not with the Wood and Pierce with running this crazy show.
So some people had asked a question now, the new lawyer, what happens to the money that was already raised? Do we know anything about that?
Wood and Pierce are keeping it all at this point. I assume they will pay that Wisconsin lawyer who's helping out some fee. Now they probably have already paid some fee because he's made the notice of appearance. But everything else is going to people that are associated with them or attached to them, as far as I know. I mean, I've repeatedly asked Wood in public arena, social media, give the money to the family, and he's refused to even say he will. So I assume that none of it's going to them.
Okay, well, it's just something that I guess most people don't appreciate is it's not really in the news now. He's a 17-year-old kid. He's in jail now indefinitely. Stupid questions. School is still closed, but we're in a school year now. I don't know what his plans were. And he sits there until forget the habeas corpus motion. I mean, when would they anticipate having the trial if they just want to get to trial ASAP?
Well, if they keep fighting the extradition, all that will be postponed. So the trial clock won't start until he appears in Wisconsin. And I anticipate it would be at least a year between the time of his first appearance and trial.
That's the right to the speedy trial. That's I would say outlandish. I know that the process works slowly. Okay, nothing else in Rittenhouse at this point.
Nope, that pretty much covers it.
Okay.
It basically was just to educate people that extradition has limited remedies available to you. You can get bail and extradition if you're not charged with a life imprisonment crime, and then you often want to fight extradition to see what happens. On top of that, you can go about various ways of contesting extradition, but they're very limited. It's got to be false identification, falsified paperwork never came in, or a very creative. I've come up with a lot of creative theories for extradition, both domestically and internationally. There is one available to Rittenhouse, and maybe by raising it here, it'll get back to Rittenhouse's team. We'll see what they do with it. But so far, what we're seeing is not an encouragement out of Rittenhouse's defense team.
Okay. I thought I had one more question, which was not extradition, not habeas corpus. Okay, I forgot what it was with Rittenhouse, but I think we've done it. Okay. One question. Someone had asked previously, and I said I'd get back to it. Blurstar95. Can you ask Robert if he'd be interested in founding a new anti-federalist party?
I've formed a kind of version of that. They're talking about the Anti-Federalist Society. If you go back and look at the Barnes votes in Rhode Island, so I was telling someone today when they were upset about my position on Barrett, I said, look, I've only been part of one party, the same party that my great-great-granddaddies were part of, and that's the Bill of Rights Party. Never been, not the Republican, Democrat, or any other party. But if you go back and look at all the Barnes votes in small-town Rhode Island when they first try to put through a constitution without a Bill of Rights, every Barnes back then, actually, you could see how they voted because you'd vote in public. Secret ballot was something that came a century later. Every Barnes vote was no constitution until we get a Bill of Rights. So I have started an organization that's somewhat dedicated to that in part, Free America Law Center. Viva always keeps the links in the how do you call it? The description below.
The pinned comment.
The pinned comment. So in the pinned comment, you can see it. And it's very low, $17 a month. The goal is to create a big enough organization that's much bigger than me and just supports the ideas of independence and freedom as best as possible. And but I agree that there needs to be more of that because the Federalist Society has too much of a monopoly and they're making strategically dubious decisions repeatedly, and they need to be challenged. I might as well be the person to do it. So why not?
Now I just remembered the question. Thank goodness. His attackers are sitting on the couch. This is the one that triggered my memory. The individual who had the firearm that said through a friend on Facebook, he would have killed the kid. No charges pressed against that guy yet.
Correct. Not only that, people connected to him are now suing Rittenhouse. So the only good news was Ron Coleman has been added to a civil defense team because Rittenhouse now faces civil lawsuits of a substantial scale. So it's lawfare at a whole different level they're waging on this kid. Now, Ron Coleman's a fantastic lawyer, so I can highly recommend that pick.
In a way, maybe it's not the worst thing that the monies that were raised don't go straight to Rittenhouse or his family. It might be seizable before judgment for a civil suit. Maybe keep it in sort of trust.
The big reason they need that money is they can give it to his mom, and his mom's money was not attachable. So any suit against him doesn't apply to any money that's in
except he's a minor. In theory, they can go after the guardian for the damages.
Not really, not under the they have to sue the mother. So it has to be something the parent would be responsible for. Otherwise, you're just stuck with what the kid has, the 17-year-old has. So in this context, they don't have a claim against the mom, as far as I know. The second part is he really needs it for bail. That's what he needs the money for. And the third part is he needs the money to have control over who they hire. So the problem right now, for people that they're asking, like, why haven't you talked to the Rittenhouses? Ethically, a lawyer is prohibited from talking to someone who's represented by counsel in general, unless that person reaches out to them. But as a lawyer, you can't reach out to them. Now, it appears that both Pierce and Wood solicited the Rittenhouse in a way that you're not supposed to do, but that ship has sailed. But most lawyers will not do that because they recognize the ethical questions and qualms about that. But especially when someone is represented, they're effectively kept from hearing from any other lawyer unless they go out and affirmatively seek it. So you're precluded effectively from getting a second opinion in the legal world because of the way the ethical rules work. So my theory was if they had the money, they would recognize they have control. Let a bunch of different lawyers pitch them to do a bunch of different ideas, and then they decide who are they comfortable with, who are they confident with, who can they afford and still have money to live, who can they afford and still get bail for them, who can they afford and still be safe and secure. And so that was my theory, and it's unfortunate that Wood decided not to pursue that path.
All right, and I'm bringing this one up. Uncivil Law. You can also subscribe to me. Uncivil Law. Nate Brody. Those are that and Robert Barnes. This is our clique of lawyers, but there's a bunch of other lawyers out there. Style varies from lawyer YouTuber to lawyer YouTuber. Okay, that's it. I mean, that's the Rittenhouse. Whether I appreciate everybody thinks there's a clear self-defense case here. I've seen the videos. I've seen Nate Brody's video on the subject. I've seen the videos. I think it's pretty clear self-defense. People now appreciate the kid's in jail until he can avail himself to that defense argument and, hope to convince a jury. But he's in jail until that time, until he can post bond or post bail or get bail. It's people are finding it to be a travesty. And then people who don't know and who watched CBC or Global News in Canada describe the situation might have a different opinion on this. Okay, Just Surfing says off topic. This is a totally off topic question. Off topic, but are you aware of Acts 17 apologetics issue with eBay where David Wood made a listing of an origami pig made with pages? I don't want to get in trouble here. I have not heard of with a religious book, and it was removed as offensive, which I can understand why that would be taken off of eBay. I'm not familiar with that, but eBay is going to be another private company with its own terms of service, and that, just reading your comment, let me just get your name properly here. Just Surfing too. That's going to be an obvious violation of terms of service. That's going to get you in trouble with the platform, period. People have been asking for 230, for us to discuss 230 CDA, but we've done it at large, I think, which is a good thing. It's indicating there's a lot of new people here that have not watched us in the past. Two
additional updates on that. One is Senator Hawley is recommending the language that I was trying to get him to do 3 years ago, but he has come around to it. Because my argument to him was allow them to be sued by creating a carrot and stick effect that could be constitutionally affirmed that says if you want immunity, you have to protect the First Amendment. And if you don't protect the First Amendment, people can sue. And he's starting to pursue that path. Now, here's a big risk for folks out there. Leading people that track on the legal side, big tech, on the antitrust side, on the consumer protection side, want to see lawsuits be capable, are worried about the Barrett's effect. The Koch Foundation is heavily supporting Barrett's nomination, and they are heavily opposed to any regulation of big tech. And the fear is, and some leading legal scholars, and you should read it, decide whether you agree or disagree with it yourself, they say that Barrett will likely rule that any attempts to regulate big tech, including Section 230 changes, will be considered unconstitutional by a Barrett-Roberts court. I don't know if they're right or not. I can just tell you that they're more experienced than I am in that field, and that's what they're concluding. So that's the other big issue I hope they ask Barrett about is about some of the antitrust jurisprudence that Roberts in particular has pursued. But the other big impact of Section 230, one is it needs to be changed so we can have access to the courts. And secondly, we need to make sure we don't have a Supreme Court that calls any such law unconstitutional.
Okay, excellent. I'm just going to go through some of the super chats that I missed, and then I think we're going to wind down anyhow. It's 2.25 hours, Robert. It flies by, and it's amazing. Although we did get to our 4 topics, I don't think we need to talk about Breonna Taylor, which, I think
a slight, one brief update. It may be the case that Kentucky Attorney General misled the grand jury on Breonna Taylor by misstating self-defense in Kentucky, because apparently self-defense is not a justification if you recklessly cause harm to a third person who wasn't attacking you. So and he may have told the grand jury that it was a complete defense without focusing on that third party component. Because Breonna Taylor was a third party who was innocent and who wasn't attacking them, it's a different self-defense standard that applies, which is basically it's just whether it was reckless or not. There is no self-defense as a justification. So there is now an open controversy over, did the Kentucky Attorney General properly instruct the Kentucky grand jury on self-defense law? Because he made some statements at his press conference that would suggest he did not. But that will be something to follow up on. That's the only other variable beyond what we've already said quite extensively on the topic. And people can look that up on Viva Fry's channel.
Oh, and I was going to say now I'm going to pull up Nate Brody put up a video yesterday or the day before, which anybody who's looking into it should watch. It's an amazing breakdown of the Breonna Taylor situation. We discussed it in our stream last week. This is a shorter version and it goes into a lot more detail. Yep. Let's see, some super chats that I missed before we get to an end on this. We got Craig Lino 504. Thanks again. He says, can't Barr make Durham release all incriminating evidence before the election so that the electorate at least has knowledge of the wrongdoing before the election?
I can assure you that Barr has been led to believe that Durham was going to issue a report, so it's a shock to him that he's not. But yes, Barr can absolutely do that.
All right. Someone was asking for Harry the guinea pig. Hold on. Can we get a cameo? No, I was just telling someone today the expression I love, systems are better than goals. The system now that I can avoid being interrupted in as much as possible is the kids go watch a movie with a friend Sunday night.
Right. That's why I say Scott Adams, whenever you agree or disagree with Scott Adams, brilliant mind. Mind. His systems, not goals. Perspective.
Yeah, and it's, once you realize it, it's true. You no longer have to have the goal once you have a system in place. And it's also, or that systems are better than wishes. Okay, Corrupt Sally Yates. Okay, hold on. This person's name. Can I get it? Oh crap! It's her name. The person's name is Corrupt Sally Yates, but it's K-O-Rupt R-U-P-T Sally Yates. He says, "Does Comey testify this week too?" Does Comey testify this week? Who knows the answer?
I heard someone say that, but I haven't personally seen that. So I know that here's the deal, folks. Lindsey Graham is in trouble in South Carolina, so he's got a tight race. So Lindsey's going to rediscover his constitutional, and he loves the nomination because he's head of the Judiciary Committee. So he needs to pull every trick out of the hat because the Trump base in South Carolina doesn't trust him at all for a good cause. So he's suddenly going to discover the importance of Spygate, and suddenly going to discover the importance of integrity in the FBI, and suddenly is, all the rest. So, but you'll see a couple of good shows because he needs to win re-election. So we'll finally see some maybe meaning. So I know he subpoenaed a bunch of people. I just don't know when it is they're scheduled to testify.
Somebody says Flynn is on Tuesday, Comey is on Wednesday. What a week! Well,
isn't it crazy?
What a year. The year is almost over, which is my only thing now is if Halloween gets canceled again in Montreal, I might lose it, but we'll see. Okay, so big week. Now, Nathan Brake says, this is another good thing we might be able to cover in 5 minutes. Any revelations about Trump's tax returns? Apparently, that's the new story. So I read it. I read an article. I'm following Cernovich's take on it because Cernovich is pretty good. Whatever you think about him, he's a very smart guy. Apparently, Trump didn't pay any federal income tax. I suspect they mean as an individual. I'm not sure. Are you following this? Are you familiar with it?
So two things with it. One is it's clearly a mass violation of criminal law. Section 103 of Title 26 of the Internal Revenue Code makes it illegal to ever disclose a person's tax returns. So somebody has been engaging in massive illegal violations of disclosure of Trump's tax returns. I would look at the New York DA's office as a potential source. The Southern District of New York is a potential source. Congress is a potential source. Somebody did something that's clearly illicit and clearly not supposed to happen. So and it's a major, massive violation and the biggest violation of a president's privacy or in American history by a long mile.
If I can stop you there, though, would this not have been already public had Trump disclosed his tax returns as is customary when running for president?
Oh, absolutely. If he had waived his privacy rights, no doubt. But he has an absolute privacy protection of this not being disclosed. And then he could suffer the political consequences for choosing not to disclose it if people so chose. But it's a massive violation, the biggest violation of a high-profile public figure, or at least the president in presidential history that I know of. Massive violation of the right to privacy. So and in fact, you can sue the IRS agents. You can sue anyone else involved under Section 6103. You can even have attorney's fees. Your attorney's fees be paid for by the IRS or the other side. So it looks to be a massive violation. So that's part one. Part two is the reason why folks are in real estate is because of the tax loopholes. So it would not surprise me at all that Trump has many years where he pays no federal income tax at all. I always suspected that was the case. Otherwise, he would have released his tax returns. So the reason why you're in real estate is you don't pay tax if you know what you're doing. Anybody that's a high-end person that has the right lawyers working for them, that has money from diverse sources of income, can dramatically and drastically and legally reduce their income tax. And so I have no doubt that Trump's in no civil or criminal trouble. They've tried to look at that for forever. There's nothing there. The New York district attorney is trying to create a smokescreen by saying something is there. There's nothing. He's been audited over and over and over again. There's no risk there. Also, every high-end lawyer and accountant has been involved in his tax return preparation. He's got zero criminal exposure, minimal civil exposure. The law was written so that real estate people could use the tax loopholes to build buildings in America. So that's been true since the 1950s. So most of your big real estate developers don't pay a penny in tax if they have any clue on what they're doing.
That's it. And for anybody who doesn't yet follow Cernovich was saying, yes, this fails to take one thing into consideration: depreciation, which I suspect is where
one of the many available. You could do captive insurance, so you could treat reserves as tax deductible deductions. You can create all kinds of bad debt deductions for deals that go bad, that carry net operating losses that carry forward. Remember, Trump had all kinds of net operating losses from the late 90s.
400 million in the years before, 112 million from what I read on, as we say, on Diagonal. Like I read quickly before the stream because the news just broke. But
and for folks that don't know, net carry forward loss, you can carry forward for 20 years. So so given the problems he had in the 90s, I'm sure he's got massive losses that will wipe off his tax bill. It may be, within a few years, he may be running out of those losses, but that's very normal. So there's nothing illegal about it, nothing unethical about it. People may not like it that a man with that much money doesn't pay tax, but that's a political issue, not a legal issue.
Same issue they have with Jeff Bezos, but it's reality is the millionaires and the billionaires have accountants to strategize. It looks crooked to the rest of us who pay 48% income tax. But yeah. All right, we got Pink Sniper 28 says next midweek stream. We'll see. We'll see
probably this week. Yeah, or maybe we'll do a combined live stream, maybe with all four of us. But we have events to do so. We have the General Flynn's thing. That's a godsend. I would like to see Sullivan whooped up a little bit personally. Then I would have celebratory drinks rather than tiered my beer drinks for Barrett's nomination. And then the debate, that's going to be fascinating. I recommend people to to the Behavior Channel, the Behavior Panel. Eric, the Unstructured podcast, has often interviewed them. They did a great breakdown as to how to look at both Biden and Trump's body language for the debates. Things like apparently Biden, like I didn't realize how much Biden is ashamed of his busing votes. But if you look at his body language when Kamala Harris went after him, that's when he lost it.
It was absolutely. And then watching even Kamala Harris's body language is an amazing thing when she was being asked questions by Colbert about, how rude and mean she was with Biden on that issue. It's going to be amazing, but I have a problem. I think Joe Biden he's going to be behind a podium. It's going to be all rehearsed, and Trump, my prediction, is going to come off as the big bad boogeyman who's going to be picking on, poor old Joe Biden.
On senior Uncle Joe.
Well, it literally has gotten to the point now where the argument is going to be made that if you don't vote for Joe Biden, it's a form of ageism. I mean, it's only a matter of time before that actually becomes the narrative.
My conspiracy theory, if I was working for the Democrats, I'd give Joe Biden COVID, kill him off, and replace him with the Montana governor. That'd be my conspiracy theory to if I was conspiring to defeat Trump. That's what I'd do.
The other thing is there's going to be a conspiracy theory one way or the other if he remains healthy. I mean, there's already the conspiracy theories going on, and I'm still reluctant to even use the word conspiracy theories. I'm just going to go with theories or conspiracy analysts. Okay, and I like Dapper Dave's comment. This is a good one that's going around. I don't care about billionaires who became politicians. I care about tax. I don't care about billionaires who became a politician tax. I don't care about billionaire who became a politician taxes. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Nobody cares about a billionaire who becomes a politician. They care about a politician who becomes a billionaire off their salary. That's a legit point. Jennifer. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just reading the next one.
Even Barnes, we're going to need you to all do a live stream for the debate, strictly for entertainment, of course, and perhaps a 2-drink minimum.
No way we can do a drinking contest with these guys. That's going to be, you're going to be drunk 5 minutes in. So Matt Taibbi does that for Rolling Stone, and he writes more for the left, but a very smart guy. Did some great stuff on Wall Street and the rest. But he had a drinking game during the Democratic debates. You were drunk like 10 minutes in every time because they all hit the little telltale indicators. I wonder how many times Biden's going to say, "Come on, man," and look. He lets another one of his favorite words.
Let me be clear. And how, whether or not Trump is going to use the term Sleepy Joe, and if so, how many times, is great. Drinking games and Vegas bets are going to be amazing things for this. And we got David Reed says tax evasion is a crime. Tax avoidance is an art.
Yes, of course. Tax avoidance is legal, everybody.
All right. And I think we're going to do it on that. It's 2.5 hours. Amazing stream. We were over 10,000 people, Robert, for the better. Amazing. Everybody, thank you for the chats. Thank you for the support, the comments. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see. No promises we do a midweek stream, but we might have to do something of a live stream for at least one of the two events. It's one thing to have all this information. We got to process it and digest it. And either way, stay tuned. You can hit us up on Twitter at Barnes_law on Twitter. I'm at Viva Fry, and you know where to find us on social. Robert, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everybody, enjoy what is left of the rest of the weekend. Another amazing stream, and we'll do it soon. See y'all soon.